Let the record reflect that we have reconvened with all members present. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I have a motion for the regular minutes of January 28, 2013.
I'll move them.
Second?
Discussion? Roll call vote?
Mrs. Sukamoto?
Yes.
Mr. Catalanello?
Yes.
Mr. Landrigan?
Yes.
Mrs. Vitale?
Yes.
Ms. Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Wolkowitz?
Yes.
Thank you. May I have a motion for the regular minutes of February 11th, 2013?
I'll move them.
Second?
Discussion? Roll call vote?
Mrs. Sukamoto?
Yes.
Mr. Catalanello?
Yes.
Mr. Landrigan?
Yes.
Mrs. Vitale?
Yes.
Ms. Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Wolkowitz?
Yes.
All right, a motion for the executive minutes of February 25th, 2013.
I'll move them.
Second?
And we already had a discussion. Roll call vote?
Mrs. Sukamoto?
Yes.
Mr. Catalanello?
Yes.
Mr. Landrigan?
Yes.
Mrs. Vitale?
Yes.
Ms. Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Wolkowitz?
Yes.
Right, may I have a motion for the regular minutes of February 25th, 2013?
I'll move them.
Second?
Discussion? Osprey?
Page 4 of 8, there needs to be an "and" inserted in the second to the last line from the bottom. Morris County and Green Acre Funds
Okay.
under public safety.
So to clarify, that's two separate funds, yeah. Thank you.
Yes.
All right, anything else? That correction, roll call vote, please.
Mrs. Sukamoto?
Yes.
Mr. Catalanello?
Yes.
Mr. Landrigan?
Yes.
Mrs. Vitale?
Yes.
Ms. Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Wolkowitz?
Yes.
Right. I'm waiting for a special guest, so I will hold off on greetings to the public. We'll go right to our reports from committee, and then we'll come back to the mayor's greeting for today. Outside of welcome everyone. And for health, Ms. Vitale.
Thank you, Mayor. Not much of a report tonight, except that we had our second food handlers class today, and one is going on as we speak at 6 o'clock until about 8 o'clock. There were 50 restaurants that were applied for it, so we're doing really good. So I really don't have much more. It's been a busy time for Board of Health, so we don't have much more to talk about other than that. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Utilities, Ms. Sukamoto.
Yeah, thank you. The electric department continues their work on making permanent repairs for storm damages last fall, and this activity will continue probably through the middle of the summer. The water department reports that the water main break on Grove Street was fixed very quickly. Water well maintenance and several repairs were done, including installing new batteries for the emergency generator at Well D. The EPA mandated unregulated contaminant monitoring regulation testing was completed, and we expect to be notified of the results in just a few weeks. Also, the department completed the monthly water sample testing on March 18th and found that we are meeting all the requirements. Thank you.
Thank you. Public Works and Engineering, Mr. Catanello.
Thank you very much, Mayor. From the DPW, mulch will start being delivered this Friday, and if residents desire mulch, they can call the garage at 973-593-3088 between the hours of 7:30 a.m. to 3 p.m. The DPW also reported, by the way, there's a literal mountain of chips there, so please don't be shy about asking for as much as you want. Potholes are continue to be filled on a daily basis. And then just a quick update on the MAF fundraising. The donor wall has been bid out and work should begin shortly. We have 30 individuals who have donated at the M Club level, which is $3,500 or greater, either in a one-time check or paid over 5 years. And those plaques were ordered today. We anticipate, or hopefully we'll have the wall up and the plaques installed in time for the event I will be speaking about later. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Community Affairs, Mr. Landrigan.
Sure. Thank you, Mayor. I have a bunch of dates to report here and then some initiatives, but I'll try to make it quick. On April 6th, the Thursday Morning Club, along with my wife, is holding a book sale in support of Union Beach. Their intent is to raise money and possibly sponsor some children to go to a summer camp. I would ask that, well, the response from the town's been magnificent. My house is full of books right now. Please come and buy books, or else I'm going to be living in a house full of books for a while. Please, please, please. On Saturday, April 13th, at the Madison Senior Center from 10 to 1 p.m., they're going to be holding a seminar or an open house really called Editing Your Life, Adapt, Declutter, and Downsize. On April 20th, the Madison Little League will hold its annual parade and opening day ceremonies. And on May 4th, which is May Day, you're going to see people around town spreading that mountain of mulch, which Rob mentioned before. It is literally a mountain from all the trees that were mulched after the hurricane. They'll be looking for volunteers. Following, I guess later in the afternoon, they're going to have some refreshments and food over at the ambulance corps. It's sponsored by the May Day Committee, and around town, you'll see these envelopes. If you see them, donations toward the May Day, and it's run by the Downtown Development Commission. So take a look. Now, we've been talking a lot about Union Beach. I received a letter from one of their councilmen today saying that 2 of the ambulances that were destroyed are being replaced through insurance. What they're asking for is some help in stocking them. I know from personal experience that could run into the tens of thousands of dollars. Coincidentally, the Community Foundation of New Jersey administers a Hurricane Sandy Relief Fund that provides funds to first responders. So I'm going to be reaching out to them and also to the Madison Ambulance Corps. Together, we're going to try to get some needed supplies down to their first aid squad so they can be up and running. I think the deadline for that is the middle of April when the new rigs are supposed to be delivered. So we'll be in touch. Okay, and finally, remember a while back there was a bad fire on 85 Park Avenue. These people effectively lost everything. During the fire, Father Monsignor George from St. Vincent's came and offered assistance to the residents. And then the next day, a very nice gentleman by the name of Elliot Knight from Grace Church appeared at my house with food cards, if these people lost their money. And then they have something there called the Recycling Ministry. So I got to thinking, which is a dangerous thing, and I said it would be nice if we could organize an effort when something like this happens. So I talked to Councilwoman Vitale and Ray Cody, and we met with the health department. We're going to form a pilot program right now. God forbid something like this were to happen again. Residents of the home would be directed to the health department. The health department would then identify what resources each of the churches have and direct the people to those churches rather than scurrying around at the last moment. In addition, the health department is a good first spot because a lot of times you lose your vital records. They'll help them get them back. It's a natural fit. They were very receptive to this. I want to thank Carmela and Ray for helping set this up. And then later on, you're going to see an item to take $20,000 from the Henry Perkins Trust Fund. I guess I could talk about it real brief right now. Is that okay? When a person loses their home, they need a place to live. Well, this fund is in place, and this is something Madison does very well. It takes care of its own to help people in need. So we're going to be requesting that $20,000 be put aside, so if somebody were to lose their home in a fire, this money would fund finding them a temporary home in a hotel or whatever. So we're going to be moving forward on that. Once this budget process is done, I'm going to work on formalizing this other process. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Public Safety, Ms. Bailey.
Thank you, Mayor. The Morris County Gun Buyback Amnesty Program was held on March 15th. One of the sites for the gun buyback program was at St. Paul's, also known as Bailey Ellard, here in Madison, and it was very successful. According to Chief Datchison, the program exceeded our expectations. 253 weapons were returned in Madison, 600 overall, including small handguns as well as fully automatic rifles. $49,000 was given out to the participants, and the chief has indicated he will continue to support future programs. Chief also did some house cleaning. 13 out of 15 cars at our police impound lot were sold for a total of $8,000. Then under Complete Streets, I'm liaison to Complete Streets, we will have a discussion of Sampson Avenue issues, including the construction as well as a nonconforming use on Sampson Avenue. This will take place May 1st, 8 a.m. in the committee room. I'm going to propose that it be discussed last on the agenda so parents in the area who have to drop off kids can make it. It will be in the committee room. And then finally, the chief wanted me to announce, both chiefs, fire and police, that the fire that Councilman Landrigan mentioned, the people involved, the 200 Club of Morris County will be honoring firefighters and EMT James Blair and firefighter Troy Pahowick with Valor Awards, and patrolman James Caveza for a Meritorious Award. They're being recognized for the life-saving efforts at a structure fire that occurred on November 17th, 2012. This will take place at a dinner on Thursday, April 25th, 2013 at the Birchwood Manor in Whippany. And if you go to www.200clubofmorriscounty.com, click on calendar, you can actually participate in this event and honor our 3 safety people. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And Finance Borough Clerk.
Thank you, Mayor.
Mr. Wolkowitz.
As you know, every year 2 council positions are up for election, and this is no different than any other year. Today was the day petitions were due in for those who wish to run for the seats that will be up for a vote in the fall. Those happen to be the seats now occupied by Councilwoman Tsukamoto and Councilman Catalanello. The Republican candidates who submitted petitions today are as follows: Patrick Rowe, Robert Catalanello, Eric Range, Diane Driscoll, and Carmen Pico. The Democratic candidates are Maureen Byrne and Jeffrey Gertler. On April 12th at 3 p.m. in this room, there'll be a drawing to determine position on the ballot. So if you have interest in attending that, by all means, it's open to the public. The other issue I'd like to talk about has to do with our budget. It has been submitted to the state. We received comments back. We're dealing with those comments. None of them are proverbial deal breakers. They're quite straightforward, and we will be on track to submit a budget on time. I would also like to mention that it had been suggested that we speak to Standard & Poor's. We had intended to do that after the submission of the budget, and that conversation took place on March 20th. We had Robert Calafoot representing our side was Robert Calafoot, Jim Burnett, and Ray Cody, and myself. And on the other side, we had Nicole Rydberg, who's the senior person at S&P, who looks over, in effect, our account. She had looked at our performance in 2012 and was highly complimentary of how the town had turned around a situation that obviously S&P did not care for. And she had reviewed, but not in great detail, the budget we've submitted for 2013, or will be submitting for 2013, and had very positive comments about it. That none of this means we're taken off the list. As you know, we're on negative watch. What it means is that we impressed her in the right way, and when they do meet, which will be sometime probably in the next quarter, and certainly they have to opine when we go into the market in the summer, we'll find out if we did enough to satisfy them. I want to emphasize, as I've said before, our budget was not designed to satisfy S&P. We think that some of the issues that S&P raised were legitimate, and we've addressed those positions, obviously, at least at this point, to their satisfaction. So I'm happy to report that. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, back to greetings to the public from the mayor. And just before I forget, I just want to announce that Cablevision will be broadcasting our council meetings on the public access channel 21, Thursdays from 3 p.m. to 6 p.m. starting this week. And before I call up our special guests, I would like a motion on Resolution 125, 2013. We're going to pull this out of the consent agenda. Resolution of the Borough of Madison authorizing a donation of surplus policing department K-55 radar units to Union Beach, New Jersey Police Department. May I have a motion on that?
I'll move that.
Second?
Discussion? Roll call vote?
Mrs. Sukamoto?
Yes?
Mr. Catalanello?
Yes.
Mr. Landrigan?
Yes.
Mrs. Vitale?
Yes.
Ms. Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Wolkowitz?
Yes.
And as I was kind of alluding to, we have some special guests in our audience in our front row. In the toughest of times, you make the best of friends, and I think what Madison and Union Beach has done is made the best of friends. And I see Mayor Paul Smith in the front row and Councilman Charlie Kokoza, also in front row, and view you as best of friends. To put Union Beach in perspective, post-Sandy, for those that read yesterday's Star Ledger, it made the picture very clear, especially as you compared it to other towns. Remember, Union Beach, square miles wise, is about half the size of Madison. $43 million in damage done to Union Beach. And that's just part of the story, because as the article was talking about lost tax revenue through lost ratables, and the fact that they've lost $620,000 in both municipal and school tax revenue from the lost ratables. That's $1.2 million. That's $620,000, 8% of their budget. And it is truly an honor to have them here as our friends, and I want to thank all of Madison for doing everything we could to help out Union Beach. Mayor Smith, Councilman Kokoza, please come up.
Hey, Mary, you want, that's long.
Good to see you.
Got one too. That's Madison.
How are you, Mayor? Hi, I'm Master Bailey. Nice to see you.
Well, I can't tell you how beautiful Madison is, and as Councilman Landrigan said, Madison helps their own, well, they also help others. God bless all of you. And we do have a flag here, Borough of Union Beach. I guess we can unfurl it.
Yep. We've got a
Charlie, say a few words, please.
Sing a little song.
I was working on a stand-up routine, so maybe this will help.
That's Tuesday nights here. So we gotta make sure it's right.
Wow. Heard it.
It's upside down.
That's right. Thank you.
So, like I said, we can't thank you enough for all you've done for us and continue to do. We are so appreciative. And we're waiting for the kids to come down for the summer, so our beach should be ready by then.
And on behalf of the residents of Borough of Madison, we have our flag. I think we have to get work. To be forever remembered in Union Beach.
This will be fine at Borough Hall.
Well, thank you. Yeah, don't run to the bank with this check, but the students, the fifth grade class at Torrey J. Sabatini, one of our 3 elementary schools, put together a fundraising effort, and they wanted the proceeds to go to Union Beach, and so I'll be at the school this Wednesday collecting the actual check for $900 and $906.
That's sweet.
And just a couple of other initiatives. Councilman Landrigan talked about the book sale coming up, and again, supported for 2 reasons. 1, to help Union Beach. Number 2, to help Bob clean out the house. On April 20th, a townwide garage sale that people will be donating the proceeds of their garage sale to Union Beach relief effort. And then Rotary, who has been running a festival, and this is on our agenda tonight to approve this event. The proceeds on June 15th, June 16th festival at the Realogy site will be going to the Union Beach effort. And the other thing that is taken on additional partners is to the children of Union Beach, who, as we were there for the reorganization meeting, we were walking out, and a mother came up and said, "Thank you so much for everything you do. We lost our house. Right now we're living with my parents, 3 generations in one home, and that's really typical. And we want to be able to help some of those children have a good summer experience. So working with 3 camps and several donors, we are putting together a campership program that will send children of Union Beach to summer camp."
Again, thank you all. We need that charge, shall we say?
Thank you. Well, we want to thank everyone from Madison, Councilman Landry, Carmelo for coming down, and all of you. We do know that all of you have been there with us. The whole town was devastated, and we're coming back one day at a time, and to have friends such as all of you makes it that much easier. It makes it more hopeful for the future. But things are going to get better. Things are going to turn around. We're better today than we were yesterday, and we'll be better tomorrow than we are today. And you are all playing a very big part in that. And we want to thank all of you very much.
Did you want to just comment on I kind of stuck that resolution in quickly about the donation rate, the radar?
Yeah.
Yep.
No, that's just terrific. No.
Okay, yep. Yep.
I'm glad we could do it.
Thank you.
All right.
God bless all of you.
Thank you. Take care.
We'll see you again. Where is this from?
Okay. Communications and petitions.
No communications to report today, Mayor.
Thank you. This is the first of 2 invitations for discussion, and this is limited to items that are on the agenda discussion and also resolutions that are listed. On our agenda, a installation memorial plaques on streets, online utility payment service charge, Fireman's Fund Insurance Company grant application, Jacob Perkins Trust Fund request, Rotary Club special permit, Madison Athletic Foundation plan, that's the fundraising plan which will lead into the discussion, and that's also, there's a resolution listed for a special event coming up in May. Municipal open space, and just so people know, we will have a presentation on the open space. No formal action will be taken tonight. That will be taken next week. So we'll probably come up with a consensus direction to go next week. So there'll be another opportunity next week to comment. And then an appropriation of $34 million for HVAC work.
$43,000.
$34,000.
Get us in
Hey.
trouble.
I had to suddenly get in the fact it's April Fool's Day, so there you go. Thank you for catching that. All right, now I got everyone's attention. Is anyone in the public wishing to be heard on those items or any of the resolutions listed? Step up, state your name, your address, and keep your comments to 3 minutes or less. Sam.
April Fool. No, there's just a couple. I'd like to...
State your name and...
Sam Cerciello, Park Avenue, Madison.
Thank you.
R116. No, the first one I'd like to talk about is number 8, the Open Space Fund. What is that all about, Bobby?
We'll be doing a presentation. Step 1 is the fundraising effort and how that leads into paying for the turf fields, and then we'll be talking about the Open Space Fund on multiple levels. One is the remaining purchase price of the land, the improvements, and also the fact that if we don't take action, the open space tax will be going up because of the calculation of 2 cents per $100 of assessed value.
While you talk about it, after I sit down and all that, it's going to go. Can we get up and can we go at it again?
As I mentioned, we won't be taking a formal vote on it until the next council meeting, so you'll be able to come back next week. There's also the second opportunity today to comment, and as I said, you'll be commenting before any formal action is taken.
Thank you. Also, Resolution 116 about the problem of Bailey Elders. I thought 2 or 3 years ago we had this all taken care of or something, that they had some solution. Why do we got to go do it again?
So Resolution 115 on the professional services.
116.
115.
I'm sorry, yeah. The professional service of the environmental study up at Bailey Ellard.
Bob, do you want to come?
Right now, we're replacing the environmental firm that did the work with a new one. We need to bring it to closure as far as what needs to be done, when it needs to be done by. When that land was purchased, and it's being used now by a number of teams throughout the borough, right abutting to where they play is what the DEP calls affected land. And we need to get a final plan of action on what is to be done to remediate that property. We were obliged to do it when the land was purchased, and we just need to finish it. It's as simple as that.
Well, if I recall, that we just had to put some topsoil on top of the bad spot or something, no?
No, it's not
deeper?
topsoil. It needs to be a proper remediation plan. That property is in the middle of a residential neighborhood. You have the Shady Lawn neighborhood on one side of it. You have the Morris Place neighborhood and Danforth on the other side, and you have Sunrise Assisted Living next to it as well. So a proper remediation needs to be done. It's not dangerous right now for children to be playing where they're playing, but yet we can't leave it the way it is.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to be heard? Seeing none, oh, yes. Yes, that is on the agenda, so you may speak on that.
Thank you, Mayor. I wanted to talk about the open space.
Name and address, please. Sorry.
Sandy Kolakowski, Park Avenue.
Thank you.
There are concerns that with the revaluation of property in Madison, taxpayers will shoulder a higher open space tax amount. As a Madison taxpayer, I share those concerns. But there are a number of reasons why the open space fund rate should remain at 2%. The most pressing of which, I think, is the debt we incurred when we borrowed over $3.4 million to install artificial turf fields at the Madison Recreation Center. We still currently owe approximately $3.2 million on these fields, and the current financing of that debt is being maintained in an interest-only bond anticipation note. In the next few years, that financing will need to be converted to a permanent bond to be paid back over 10 to 15 years. I ask this current council, especially council members Catalanello and Tsukamoto, who voted to take on this additional debt, to have the courage to tell the taxpayers we need to face up to this challenge now. We should agree to use the extra money that will be generated through the property revaluations effect on our open space taxes to get a significant portion of this debt behind us. In 4 years, we could lower the debt by $1 million and still maintain our historic level of open space funds for other uses, including open space, acquisition, park and recreation maintenance, and historic preservation. As someone who voiced concern about borrowing over $3.4 million for the artificial turf fields at the MRC, I'm not happy that we have to dedicate this much open space money to their purchase. But we are where we are. And I'm sorry to say it, but my opinion, it's unforgivable that the very same council members who voted for this debt are making budget suggestions that essentially tell the taxpayers borrowing all this money for artificial turf fields didn't have financial consequences. Madison residents deserve better than this. Over the past several years, our budget challenges have resulted in fewer municipal workers to take care of the needs of Madison residents, a lowering of the borough's bond rating outlook, and delays in repairing our roads and tackling other critical infrastructure needs. Please leave the Open Space Trust Fund rate where it is and allow us to build back some resiliency into the borough's financial well-being. Thank you.
And as we get to the discussion phase, council members can comment on that. Anyone else wishing to be heard? Yes.
Tom Harlan Putis, 27 Pomeroy Road. So Mayor, you're going to have an opportunity for the public to talk again after the presentation.
Not immediately after, not until we come to the second round of...
Yeah, number 18.
But, yeah.
I don't know how long that's going to take, but there'll be an opportunity.
Yes.
So can I ask a question on something, though, lower than that? There was something here about the resolution of the Borough of Madison opposing state Senate bill prohibiting municipal registration of multifamily dwellings.
Yes.
What is that about?
Matt, you want to take that one?
The state is, there's proposed legislation where the state is basically trying to usurp a municipality's right to register multiple family dwellings, 3 or more dwellings. And the League of Municipalities has recommended that they're opposing it, and they're recommending that municipalities adopt a resolution notifying our local legislatures, both senators and legislators, to pass a resolution opposing that legislation because, again, it's usurping rights of a local municipality and having the state do it. And each municipality is so unique that the municipality's beliefs is that the local municipality should have control over its multiple family units, etc. Every municipality is different. There's some municipalities have very few multiple family dwellings, others have an inordinate amount, and so it really is a localized issue, and the league believes that it's just a usurpation of our rights by the state.
But has the state already taken that
No,
right
this
away,
is proposed
or it's-
legislation.
Okay.
It's just proposed. So we want our legislatures in the Borough of Madison, the Senate and the 2 Assembly people to understand the position of the governing body when they deliberate in both houses on the passage of this bill.
Right. So the reason it caught my attention is that I recently put a rental unit on the market in Madison, and I went to change the electric service over to the tenant's name, and whoever is responsible in the electric utility department told me that I have to register the house with the state now. Is that something different? Right.
One family house?
It's a one-family house?
Yeah, the Maple House.
Right. This only applies to 3 units.
3 units or more.
Okay.
This is multiple family dwellings.
So right now, if I have a multiple family dwelling, I don't have to go to the state? Right now? Right now, I
You
don't.
do have to go to the state right now. What they're trying to do is local municipalities, the way Madison works is you are utilizing the state for that registration, but you have the right to ultimately take it back. What the state's trying to do is prevent you, the borough, from ever exercising that right in the future.
We now have two family and lower, or one. Yep. So it's rental property, and the reason we do it at a local level is to have the owner's information in case there is an emergency of the, to reach out to the
Right.
owner.
So the way it will read is that you don't even have to tell the town that you have a multifamily. You only have to tell
the state, right.
Correct.
Okay.
And we want to, and the clerk just mentioned the state does notify the municipality, and right now and we just want to be able to keep that option alive. And this is a non-binding, we're just asking the Senate and Assembly to vote this bill down, so we have that option.
Okay. Okay, thanks for the clarification.
You're welcome. Anyone else wishing to be heard on any resolution or agenda items? Seeing none, I close this part of the meeting and move on to agenda discussions. And first one, installation of memorial plaques on municipal streets, and we have Mayor Jack Dunn here and several others of the committee. Jack, want to step up to the...
A little different looking down here.
A lot more fun from that angle, isn't it, though?
I told my wife I had to go to a council meeting, and she said, well, at least you'll be home before midnight. Mayor, thank you for putting this on the agenda. A group of veterans, professionals, business people, and just plain old citizens are seeking the council approval for a project honoring and remembering our war dead. Since World War I, World War II, Korea, and Vietnam, thousands of Madisonians had answered the call to arms, and that has happened, like I say, so many times, but of all of those thousands who left, 58 never returned back to Madison. We wish to honor these fallen warriors by placing a small cast plaque with their name on it and affixed under the street sign of the neighborhood that they once lived. This plaque requires no maintenance and does not compromise the existing street signs. This is a sample of the plaque. There are 58 names that will be placed on 38 plaques on 36 streets throughout the borough. Many streets have more than one fallen warrior. For instance, Central Avenue, in the course of these wars, has lost 5. North Street has lost 4. Pomeroy Road, 3. And Academy Road, Woodland Road, Cook Avenue, Lathrop Avenue, Highland Avenue, Community Place have all lost 2. And on these small streets, you can see the impact that this has had on the community. The average age of those lost was 22 years old. Their ties to the community are listed as a Medal of Honor recipient, the one of 5 that received that medal during the Korean War from the state of New Jersey. A son of a former mayor, sons of 2 former council members, sons of a police officer, sons of a firefighter, 2 brothers from Drew. Their father was a professor. They lived on Madison Avenue. Both were lost during the war. The first woman Army nurse was killed during World War I from Madison. A grandson of Lincoln, private secretary, was lost in World War II. 6 are buried overseas in American-run cemeteries. The remains of 8 have never been found. And 3 friends from high school are buried in an American cemetery in France, side by side. The title of this project is Always With Us, and we hope to have this funded by private and public funds. The cost of each plaque is $100, which covers the cost of the bracket that affixes it to the pole. However, any amount would be welcome, and this group will be responsible for installing these particular plaques. These warriors left their footprints on the streets of Madison, and we wish to add their names to the neighborhoods that they left. Are there any questions in reference to this?
Austria and then Rob?
Mayor
Yes.
Dunn?
Yes, officer.
Question. You've like got 5 names on one street. So
Yes.
how is that going to be handled?
All right, well, we're not going to put any more than 3 names on one plaque.
All right, 3 names on one plaque.
And the plaque that I just passed around, that is the smallest of there's 2 sizes. That one is 7 by 5. The one with the 3 names will be 8 by 6, which is only this much bigger. And they'll be in as close. Well, the ones with the 3 names or 2 names, naturally, they will be placed in an area that would probably be the most noticeable. However, if there's one, we're going to try to get it as close to the home that they lived in. We did a lot of research on this, and we have the addresses of everyone that died, which I think was great, especially when you're going back into World War I. And so we hope the council will accept this, and we're ready to go. We already got 1,000. We don't want to give it back.
Sounds great. Rob?
Thank you, Mayor. Would you consider including Madison residents killed in the World Trade Center attacks on September 11, 2001?
We already had that up at Condorso Park. In fact, I was the mayor at the time, and we have a piece of steel that came from the World Trade Center with the names of those that died there. We dedicated that with the family members.
Yes. I mean, I'm all for this. I would also support if you wanted to add plaques like this on the streets for those residents who perished on that terrible day as well.
I would consider it as a separate project, quite honestly, but I think it's a good idea. In fact, one of those that died lived right next door to me, and we don't have any war dead on our street, so I'd love to look at a plaque on my street. Austria, I thought you...
No, that was my only question. Thank you.
Jack, you didn't tell us the most important place to send money.
Yes.
Where do you want your money? And who does it made out to?
My wife is a treasurer. Whenever I get a project, she gives me $5 a week. But she's good. She's a former banker. And the name of the project is always with us, and it's care of my address, 23 Kensington Road in Madison.
Okay.
And we have a bank account at a local bank. We have that set up. We would hope that we can gather the funds to make the first presentation on the street on Memorial Day. The plaques do take 6 weeks to do, and we hope we can expedite it.
Jeannie?
And we're shopping Madison. They're being made by Stuart Morris.
Yes, Jeannie?
Yeah, in terms of the total cost of this project, I was wondering if we have any money from the patriotic celebration budget that we can actually use for this?
Certainly, we talked about that as being another source of funds to augment the process that, we can share that with the committee so they can review it, but I think there's probably some funding available.
That would be good.
But certainly, again, donations to Always With Us, care of Roberta Dunn at, what number Kensington was that again?
23.
23 Kensington. And so this is a resolution is listed as in the consent agenda as resolution 127. And Mayor, thank you for coming out of retirement to come to the council meeting. I want to thank you not only for this project, but the book that was put together under your leadership, and also what so many people recognize or notice and comment on as they walk into Hartley Dodge Memorial is the honor roll in the rotunda downstairs. And as you walk out tonight, take a look at that and take a moment to thank all those that gave their lives for our country.
Freedom is not free.
That's,
Yeah.
Somebody got a clock?
No, John does.
it's in good hands of Johnny there. John, good to see you. Online utility payment service charge. Jeannie?
Yep. This item is about paying your utility bills. Currently, there are 3 methods that our residents can use to pay our utility bills. That is both for electric and for water bills. One is the traditional way of mailing in the check or stopping by Borough Hall to give the department a check. A second way of doing that is paying online through individuals' banks. And then, in turn, the banks will issue a check and mail it in to the billing department. The third way, which is we consider the most cost-efficient and the preferred way for the borough, is to pay online through RoseNet. Looking at how the residents pay their utility payment, only a very small portion, approximately 5% of the people, utilize the online payment through RoseNet. Also, since the online payment service provider started charging a $1 service fee per transaction, many of the utility payers have switched to the other 2 methods, either by check or bank online payments, which both methods are labor-intensive for the borough staff. So in order to improve customer service and staff efficiency, we're proposing to discontinue charging the payers and have Borough absorb the $1 service fee. The Utility Committee had a meeting back in February. Mrs. Vitale, the Borough administrators, and the Utility Department all were very supportive of discontinuing the $1 service charge, and because we believe that the staff savings from not having to manually process the payment for any RoseNet online transactions far offsets the $1 cost. So subsequent to the meeting, Mr. Cody, Ms. Carey, and also Mr. Sanderson have made arrangements with the service provider and have implemented plans to notify the utility payers, and also have made modifications online to make this possible. I'm hoping that the council will approve this proposal and also encourage the use of RoseNet online payments method instead of the other 2 methods that residents are using currently.
Thank you. Any questions? This is listed on the consent agenda as resolution. No, it's not. We don't have a resolution on the site. Never.
Just notification.
Yep. So we'll just administratively do that.
So go
Yep.
ahead. We have
Yep.
consensus to
Yep.
go ahead? Okay. Great. Thank you.
Okay, Fireman's Fund Insurance Company, or Fireman's Fund Insurance Company grant application, and it's Resolution 123. Is Chief Lou here?
No. This is just a request from the fire chief to have the mayor author a letter with the approval of the council seeking a $5,000 grant from the Fireman's Fund Insurance. We have the Jaws of Life that hydraulics are still operational, but it's a 17-year-old piece of equipment, and they'd like to replace the hydraulic pump on that equipment that's used for extraction of people who are involved in auto accidents to get them out of vehicles when they're trapped in their cars. And so before this unit fails, they'd like to replace the pump now, and this would be a grant opportunity. They just recently gave us a grant, and they invited, because they were so impressed with the facility and the use of the funds, to apply for additional funding, and that's what this is.
Any questions? Again, that's part of the consent agenda. Okay, Jacob Henry Perkins Trust Fund request. Mr. Landry?
Sure, Mayor. I alluded to it before when I talked about the fire on 85 Park Avenue. This fund was set up, if I recall, it was Ray, was it a dentist in town who set up this
Yes.
fund? Right, for this purpose. So what we want to do is just take $20,000 of this money, set it aside to provide funds for housing for people who are displaced in an emergency.
Questions? Jeannie and then Osri?
Yeah, the question is, how much money do we have in this account? I know that every year we use the money in the trust to help our seniors. For example, like pay their property taxes, and so just want to make sure that we still have sufficient funds to pay for all these regular use
Ray and I spoke about it. We have about over 300,000.
currently.
Yep.
Okay, and this is after we took money out to pay for the van, correct?
That's correct, which is going back to, we have 300,000, which is the original corpus from the donor. It was a Madison dentist. When he died, his estate left $200,000. That's now grown to $300,000. In addition, there's $68,000 of investment income or dividends, and that's what we use annually to help some seniors pay their property taxes and other charges so they can stay in Madison and out of institutions. There's adequate funding to support what we did earlier in the year or late in 2012 to advance a portion of the costs of the new senior citizen van that will be replenished shortly by a grant from Investor Bank. So we're solvent and we have available dollars, and that's why they left us the money to help people, and that's what we'd like to do.
And just a quick question, with the, did the will say you have to protect the corpus, or we've done it just basically on policy?
Well, a combination. There was a challenge to the will by the donor's sons, and the original purpose was to assist senior citizen women in Madison who needed housing. When the settlement of the suit by the children was resolved, the scope of the purpose was interpreted. They call it the Cypre doctrine, where there's a charitable doctrine that the Attorney General can argue to expand the purpose. And at that time, the use was expanded to basically anything that was good for the community in terms of housing, payment assistance, rental assistance, paying their utility bills. It didn't have to be restricted to only single females. It could be anyone who was a Madison resident. So we believe we have a legal opinion that says we can use it for this purpose. And this is this fund would stay with the health department. So if we have an emergency like 85 Park Avenue, everyone responded. St. Vincent's came that night and wanted to help and had spiritual assistance. The next day there was furniture, but there was no real housing available other than the Red Cross responded, but on a short-term basis. We need something to get families who are in crisis like that stabilized that night. So we thought by having Board of Health be the coordinator of all the benefits, coordinating the reaction, we'd have this social network for our families if they ever, God forbid, end up in this situation again. So that's why we're trying to set this up. And then we're starting with 2 institutions. There's other interfaith organizations that want to join. We want to start slow, with Bob's help, get it off, and then we'll expand the network, and hopefully we'll have everybody engaged helping families.
Mr. Cody answered my question.
Okay, very good. Any other comments or questions? Okay, again, that's Resolution 121. Okay, Rotary Club Madison Special Event Permit. And just a clarification, because we have a lot of Rotary members at the table, that no Rotary members derive any benefit, and Matt, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but since no Rotary members derive any benefit from this festival, you can partake in the discussion and vote on the resolution.
That's correct.
Thank you.
I can explain it. There's been a request by the Madison Rotary Club to conduct a family festival, which is similar to what they've done in past years. The difference is this year, the event would be in Madison, not in Florham Park. Our newest corporate neighbor, Rheology, has graciously agreed to provide their parking area to the rear of their building on Chateau Theory for this purpose at no charge. And the request in the permit is for June 15th and 16th. The hours on the 15th would be from 12 noon to 10 p.m., on the 16th from 12 p.m. to 6 p.m. And as the mayor alluded to earlier, the net proceeds after paying the expenses of conducting the family festival would be dedicated to hurricane relief in Union Beach.
Questions or comments? Okay, Jeannie?
From the document here, it says that we need to receive a proof of a contract agreement with the Madison Police Department and the cost for that. Have we received that as part of this? Because it is very important to have that contract, both to protect Rotary, also to protect the borough.
Right.
Yeah.
Do we
I can
have
speak
that?
to it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Bob.
Oh,
I had a meeting with them. They've already talked to the police department, and if the contract isn't ready now, it will be.
great.
The conversations have been had.
Thank you.
And just so residents understand, this is a much more limited hours-wise than the festival that had been actually run in Florham Park last couple of years. So that's a due respect to the fact that it is closer to the residents, and so it is just in the evening hours, just on that Saturday night, and it's just a two-day event. All right. And moving on to the Madison Athletic Foundation fundraising plan. Got a little presentation on the plan, but while Jim is setting up, Rob, you want to talk about the resolution as listed and the fundraising event that is being planned?
With pleasure, Mayor. Thank you. So on May, I believe it's 18th, right?
May 18th, yes.
Yeah, busy day today. On May 18th, the Madison Athletic Foundation will be hosting a tailgate party at the parking lot of the MRC turf field sites. It will start at 7:30. We will include, for the price of the ticket, it's $50. You will there will be a cash bar. There will be silent auctions, public auctions. There'll be a band, food, and other sorts of fundraising activities while we're there. We're limiting it to 400 tickets. So assuming we get the approval to do it this evening, tickets will go on sale immediately. And we hope to raise $30,000 to $50,000 once everything is said and done, between the money we make in ticket sales and in refreshment sales, as well as the auctions. Thank you.
Assuming it gets approved tonight, where can they buy these tickets?
They will, may I ask the only other MAF, where can they buy the tickets? It'll be on the website, right? Yeah, the tickets will be on the website.
Okay. Yep. Questions or comments from the council? Jeannie?
Is this rain or shine?
It will be rain or shine. It will be tented,
Thank you.
and the band will play on rain or shine. Absolutely.
Band will play on.
Yes. For those of you who've been to Grateful Dead concerts in the rain, it's like they can be quite a lot of fun.
We won't go there. Any other comments or questions? Again, this is Resolution 129. So we're talking about the non-direct borough funding part of it in this first presentation. I want to thank Rob Catanello as our liaison to the MAF and the fundraising effort, and also thank Marty Horn, Nino Coviello, Brian Agnew, and all the members of the MAF for their effort on behalf of the borough in this public and private partnership to make these turf fields possible, serving Madison Recreation, the Madison schools, all the residents of Madison, and even now, as you'll see, providing income to help pay for it through rentals. Also want to thank Bob Landergan for his role as liaison to Recreation as we went through this process. We wanted to sit down and go confirm all the numbers as it feeds into the overall commitment. And step one was just a definition clarifying, and one is the fundraising, and that's basically solicitation, acquisition of major and small tax deductible gifts that are made to the MAF. For those, just a little reminder, MAF is a 501c3, so any donations made to the MAF are tax deductible. The fundraising effort includes special events such as the May 18th one, which is not tax deductible because you're getting something in return, yes, unless you buy something at silent auction for a whole lot more than it's worth, which I encourage you to do. And there's raffles and the sign sales. And so that's the fundraising effort. And then the other part...
And the donor wall as well.
Which
the annual appeal, yes.
Right. So the donor wall recognizes the donations and the annual appeal and so on. Those are all part of the solicitation acquisitions of the gifts. And then part two is the fees, and these are, right now they're semi-mandatory, but the various leagues have pledged to collect user fees on behalf of this project and pass those user fees to the MAF and then on to the borough. These are not tax deductible because they're mandatory once the leagues approve a user fee. What we are suggesting as we go through this process is that these user fees will be backed by ordinance, and also the rental fees backed by ordinance, so the money goes directly into the borough, and it is secured through, because it is as you'll see, it's a major part of our funding plan, not only to pay for the current debt service, but as we go forward, to make sure there's a fund to keep this the top-notch facility that it is today. And if you have not seen this facility, I ask you, especially now as spring is here and it's a rainy season, we'll be able to use it more than if it was a natural turf field. Stop by there, especially on a Saturday morning, to see the impact it's making. And we want to make sure that there's a fund in place as we go 10, 15 years down the line and the turf has to be replaced, that it can be done. So those are user fees and rental fees, and we'll go through a process of backing those up by ordinance. So just talking about the overall site improvement budget, the $3.5 million, which you've heard that number, is the cost of building the complex. The fields, all the grading, the fences, everything involved there. Field house was done separately and then donated, but we want to count that as part of the overall project because it helps us put all the fundraising dollars in one location and enables us to really recognize the work of the MAF. And one of the things we talked about is the work is not done there, and so we're talking about other improvements to be fully defined, and we don't have the committed funding yet, but we hope to have that. And that is more appropriate seating, bleachers, because it is a major host site for games and activities, and we don't have the best possible seating. And so we will define that 100,000 at a later point. So to talk about the MAF, what they have done to date, $331,801. I guess I probably should have rounded off, but
Actually, I just got the updated numbers today, and it's closer to 406,000.
so we're up to
Raised
yep.
Yes. We've had a flurry of activity on the annual appeal.
All right, probably as spring arrives, people are beginning to, or someone like me who's gone through the mail and finally.
Yeah. But that's irrelevant. We can go with these numbers.
Yeah, and one of the things we do have to make sure is we don't double count, because then we have the future fundraising, so making sure that some of that is last year or future. On the presentation that was done by the MAF in January, we saw the number of $875,000, as Rob pointed out, coming from multiple sources: the sale of signs, the donor wall, the special events, the raffles, and so on. But what we want to do, and this is done in all fundraising efforts, is a slight discounting, because sometimes there is a pledge loss as you go forward, especially with a 5-year campaign. So we just played safe, took 10% out, and hopefully we won't have to worry about that in the future. But the total number comes up to $1.1 million and change. And what's significant of this number is twofold. Is we entered into this process several years ago. We talked about private fundraising of about $1 million, and so there's a $1 million, and then we added in the field house of $115,000. So there you see that we have the private fundraising and the money to cover the field house. And then user fees. This is currently $20 per participant. These are sports leagues that use the facility. So if it's a league that does not use the turf field facility, they are not collecting or are they transferring user fees over. And current history shows us, or current experience shows us, that we can expect $50,000 in annual user fees. Rental fees, the first year we collected $20,000.
Just 20,000 roughly.
Yep, and I think we're already at $25,000 for this year, from what I understand. And we have a fee structure that probably is not where it should be for the high-quality complex we have, so we will formalize that fee structure to give $35,000. So that is $85,000, which initially will be available for debt service, and in the future, again, will be available for reserve to reskin the field. As I mentioned, we want to have an ordinance in place that secures this in two ways. One, secures it, that is collected for the users of the field, And number two, secures it in a way that is not used for something else, that a future council can't say, oh, let's go use it for another project, and we're going to ignore the fact that the turf needs to be replaced. Current status. I'm just kind of repeating some numbers just to bring us where we are. $3.5 million of the original project. The borough down payment, and this was through the initial bond of $167,000. Fundraising principal payment, so fundraising to date has also covered interest payments, but to take the $70,000, and that leaves us $3.2 million that is being covered in short-term notes. And then as we look to the future, we take that $3.2 million and we got to add back in the $115,000. Just go backwards a second here. Maybe I won't. Because that, if you remember, it was $3.5 million I started with, so we got to add in $115,000. What's not in there is $100,000 of additional things, so we're not looking to fund that at this point. We'll look for other funding sources to do the final improvements in the facility. We talked about the $1.1 million of fundraising by the MAF, but we took already out the $70,000 of a principal payment. We've already, the 1.1 did not include, we took out any interest payments already. That was net fundraising. So leaves $2.3 million to be funded in other methods. So before we go to the next part of the presentation, any questions on the fundraising plan? So again, it's a $1 million fundraising plan, securing user fees and rental fees through ordinance, and $2.3 million that is left. Robin and Jeannie?
The user fees and field rentals are not included in the MAF fundraising 2010 to 2017 line, correct?
Right, so well, from 2010 through 2012,
right,
they're in that number.
Anything
moving forward.
So there's still $85,000,
right,
which we all believe was pretty conservative, assuming we can get, our fee structure more in line with, for rentals, more in line with what we think the facility would command.
Yep.
So.
Yeah, there's a cushion in there, and that, correct. Jeannie? Yeah.
On this slide, the $115,000, that field house has already been donated. Why are we still carrying the cost?
Because I am showing the full amount of their fundraising. I want to make sure that they get credit for all the money they raised, which included $1 million.
So that million included the 115?
Correct.
Yes. Okay.
So
that's why.
Yep. So it's
and it includes user fees up till 2013,
correct,
but not going forward.
Yep. Okay. And the one thing on this amount, and as we go into our next conversation, we will have to do some short-term borrowing to cover the future fundraising over the 5-year plan. The goal would be that it's covered out of the user fee, the interest payments are covered out of user fees, and not, so we have a full amount of fundraising going right to the principal, and not any of the fundraising going to
I actually have some more numbers as well. Just for the record, the MAF has a cash balance of $126,473 as of this afternoon. They've taken in about 406, paid out 279, 113 for the field house, $82,000 for the raffle winner, 27,000 for the interest payments to date, 50,000 in principal, and $7,500 in miscellaneous expenses for field signs, the appeal letter, and other operating costs. So,
thank you.
So hopefully, when it comes time to refinance, we'll be able to knock down a couple $100,000.
Oh, yep, that'd be great. Other comments or questions before we go to the next section? Just as we go to the next section, is there a comfort level? This is one of the reasons I wanted to step us through before we get to the $2.3 million and how it affects open space, is that there is a comfort level with that $1 million as fundraising. And with what Rob has reported to this point, and the fact that we've got $250,000. Is that a...
I'm comfortable.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we're good with, and so as Bogart would have said, you know, we're paraphrasing, a continuation of a great relationship. Okay.
Thank you. Okay, part two. If I can get this to work. It does work. Okay, so part two, I will attempt to pose a number of questions. And I say pose because we're still in discussion. I've had a lot of input from a large number of you. Many of them seem to be here tonight, which I appreciate. And did that just, what happened there?
I think you hit the wrong button and took it out of...
There we go. I got it now.
There we go.
Sorry.
And you hit the right button.
Okay. To pick up where I left off. Yeah, no, I need more than a diagram. At any rate, we've solicited comment, and indeed, we've gotten a lot of comments. And basically what's at issue is what we're going to fund and what the impact would be on what's in the open space fund as the remainder, and what happens to the open space tax. As was said earlier, the tax now is at 2 cents per hundred in assessed value. Since we've gone through a reassessment, if we leave it at 2 cents, it will automatically produce a tax increase. And so the question is, do we want to have that happen? We had a speaker earlier who obviously does. I know, speaking to some of you, you'd prefer not. So let me go through this so you can better understand what the implications are. And from that, this council, and with your input coming along, hopes to have something together. In fact, we'll have to have something together by our next meeting on the 8th. So let me start the presentation by showing you where we are, I think. Yeah, good. Okay, so let me begin with the left-hand side, the MRC land, because this is on track to what it was intended to be. In other words, when the land was purchased, it was purchased at a price of $13,050,000 with the expectation that Madison would have to pay a small portion of that total amount. The rest would be forthcoming from the state, county, et cetera. And indeed, with the exception of $325,000, that has happened. The numbers, by the way, I'll be showing you on this table are aggressive. They're aggressive in the sense that, as I just said, we're assuming the state will pay us an additional $325,000. We don't have that money. But I'd rather do a sort of best case rather than a worst case. If you go to the right-hand side, that just repeats what you saw a moment ago when the mayor made his presentation. The reason for the star you'll see in a moment, but that's making the same point, that that's pledged money but not collected, much like the state's $325,000. Now, that leaves us with two balances that for our purposes right now we're going to assume get funded. Why they'd be funded with the terms that you see is something I'll discuss in more detail momentarily. But insofar as the land's concerned, we're talking about a 20-year bond with an interest rate of 3.25%. The MRC fields funded for 15 years at 2.75. And again, I'll walk you through that momentarily. That gives us the following line of, in fact, I have a laser here. Gives us the following line of what the first-year debt service would cost for each of these. And following up, you can see that the first-year debt payment, it's just the addition of those, you take this plus this, you get to this, is $457,545. The annual open space revenue this last year, 2012, was $416,000. So if we left it unchanged in the amount we collect, we can adjust the rate to achieve that, we would find ourselves with an annual funding shortfall of $41,545. So the simple point is if you buy the assumptions and you indeed believe it makes sense to do this funding now, that we'd have to have an incremental increase, not a huge one, in the amount of money we collect. It would still be a significant decline in the actual open space tax rate from its current 2%. It's approximately.
Should we hold
sorry?
questions till the end?
Yeah.
I'm sorry?
I was
We're
just
just holding questions to the end so you
Oh,
get through all.
sure.
Yeah.
Okay. So that gives you a sense of the starting point. Now, how were these interest rates selected? See, I told you I'd get to it momentarily. So we had 3.25 for the land at 20 years, and we had 2.75 for 15 years for the fields. I'd like to just say the way we did this is we called up our bond counsel, and this is what he told us to do. But in fact, that's what happened. We called up Steve Rogat, and we said, give us what you think are logical rates to be looking at today for funding in August. And that's what he came up with. Now, if you ask me my personal opinion, I don't think rates will be that high. And for that reason, I included this section, which is the current rate as of last week in the municipal bond market for AAA credits, and this is the impact it would have on our overall financing costs. All right, so if rates remained unchanged, we'd need about $30,000 less per year than I showed earlier. So the extent of our shortfall would be significantly lower, though it would still exist. Now, why were these maturities selected? Well, land lasts in perpetuity. So if you could get a bond that would last in perpetuity, it would be a perfect match. Unfortunately, you can't. And I was hoping that our bond counsel would say we could at least go out 25 years, because that would reduce the annual servicing cost. But in his judgment, Madison's credit would go best at a 20-year length maturity. He thinks it would be difficult to go beyond that. Now, again, as we approach August, we'll go into the market and test it. If it looks like it can issue 25 years, I would be a strong advocate to do that. And that would also decrease the amount we need for purposes of servicing these bonds. Insofar as the fields are concerned, it gets a little trickier, because there are two components to the fields. One is the actual turf field itself, and the other are all the improvements that were made to that site: fencing, grading, lights, etc. I mean, it's parking. So if you go there, you see that this was once the pit, as some of you probably remember, and now it's some beautiful fields. It didn't happen. It wasn't just a question of rolling the fields out. A lot of work had to be done. So what we're assuming here is that the MAF will be funding the field surface, the $1 million or so. That field surface has, correct me if I'm wrong, a warranty for 10 years? 8 or 10?
Yeah.
And we're 2 years into it. Bond counsel said if we went out with that story, we would get 10-year money at best. We would not get 15-year. I've explained just a moment ago it's beneficial to go further out. So we're saying that this amount of funding, this $2.328 million, is needed to fund the improvements we made to the fields, to the area that encompasses the fields. Having trouble with my trigger finger. Now, you may know we've been using bond anticipation notes to fund both of these projects, both the land and the fields. So the question is, why would you bother replacing them, right? I mean, they seem to work well, and you may recall that we've been able to borrow at outstandingly low rates. It's cost us virtually nothing. Well, I put down the definition of, a bond anticipation note, just to give you a better understanding of how the market perceives of this instrument. And I highlighted what I thought were the most important points. I usually don't read slides, but bear with me. So if I just pick up those parts I highlighted, it's a short-term interest-bearing security issued by governments such as local municipalities wishing to generate funds for upcoming projects. The point is, it's tended to be used as a way of getting involved in projects that you don't currently have the money for, but you know it's coming in. So it made a lot of sense to do it for the land, because we knew that if not all that money would be coming in, certainly most of it, And the tail at 2.8 million would have to be funded in time. But until we got to the point where we knew how much would have to be funded, we were going to use bond anticipation notes. With the fields, it was different, but gets you to the same place. We knew there was fundraising going on. We were trying to get a handle on how much funds were reasonable to count into that exercise. We wanted to see if there were other sources. There is a potential other source that's not included in this presentation that would not interfere in any way with the MAF's work, and if that were to come through, it would be very significant. So we haven't, you know, number one, I would encourage everyone here and everyone who watches this on TV, if you've given a thought to putting some money into the MAF, now's a good time to do it. And, you know, anything that takes us out of what is really a transitional funding environment into one that's longer term and matches the liabilities we're looking at in terms of the use of these things makes a lot of sense. You should also note that you can't use these indefinitely. They do have a 10-year term, and they are interest only for the first 3 years. Then you have to start paying principal anyway. So you're not going to an entire bond, but you're forced to kind of get, you know, halfway there. Let me then show you why we think it's a good idea to bond now. This shows municipal interest rates for AAA credits, I'm sorry, for AA credits, lower than us, from 1970 to just about now. And the source is a firm that's in this business, and their source is the Federal Reserve Board. So these are, you know, these are about as good as you can get. Now, I said rates, I not too long ago said rates were as low as they've been since Eisenhower was president, and I didn't like the slide I could do out of that, but I did follow up by saying they're still around where Nixon was president. Indeed, if you go to the beginning in 1970, you'll see I wasn't exaggerating. Now, I'm not a pessimist when it comes to the markets, but I've learned in the markets that what goes down eventually does go up, including interest rates. And so there's a question of, do you want to postpone this issuance for yet another year and hope that this upturn in lowest cost for the year is just an aberration? You know, we have something of a fiduciary risk, right? As members of the council, I mean, my vote is I don't think I want to wait because I am concerned that with conversations about tax deductibility, with the fact that a major credit went under today in California, that this market's going to get a little shaky. And as I say, I think we're looking, these are incredibly low levels. If you look, I mean, to go back to 1982, which most of us, I think, remember, they were at over 13%. That's pretty alarming. But if you go back here to 2008, a lot more recently, you can see that we, excuse me, we hit a high of 6%, whereas now we're more like a little under 4, right? So that's, you know, that's a reasonable difference. In monetary terms, per $1 million, that spread is $20,000 a year for term credit. Now, there are certainly more than 3 alternatives of how we can do this funding with the open space tax. But I've picked 3 that are clear differentiators, one from the other, that make obvious choices. One is collect the same amount of money through the taxes we do today. And that means we'd have to get the rate up to, well, it would be 1.23 cents per $100 of assessed valuation. And that would have the nice advantage of having absolutely no increase in taxes, assuming your revaluation of your home puts you in the average home bracket, right? The con is it wouldn't give us enough money to pay off both the fields and the land, as I showed earlier. We'd have an inherent deficit. We could bond only the land, which was always intended, and that would leave approximately $177,000 a year for additional open space projects. So I just leave that as an observation. But the point is, leaving it where it is today and funding both the field and the land is not an option. And you would have no money left over for any open space projects, including, by the way, maintenance and improvements on things we've already bought. So I'm not talking about new acquisitions. All right, why does this work for you and it doesn't work for me?
B.
There we go. All right, the other alternative is to keep the rate unchanged at 2 cents per $100 of assessed value. Ms. Kolakowski earlier supported that view. That would raise $676,000 a year, far above, nice increment over our current 416. So the pro is it results in a very well-funded open space fund. It bonds the fields and the land, and you would still have $218,000 left over for additional projects. So you would actually have more left over funding both projects than you would now if you just funded the land, all right? So that $177,000 I said you would have if you just funded the land but left the amount you collect unchanged. You know what I'm saying? If you leave the rate unchanged, you generate a sufficiently larger amount of money so you could do both servicings and you would still have $218,000 left over. The only problem with this is it will increase your taxes, right? And it is what I called over the summer the stealth tax because you didn't see it coming, right? It's not something we discussed here as a tax change. So just, everyone should be aware of that. And I'll show you the magnitude of those changes before I'm done. Number 3 is to decrease the open space tax to 1.65. That's 1.65 cents. We're really talking about very small increments, which would result in $558,350 in annual proceeds. Now, you might ask, where did that number come from? It came from my backing into asking the question, what if we wanted to bond the fields, bond the land, pay both of those, and still have $100,000 left over for the open space fund to be used for improvements? I'm not sure about acquisitions. $100,000 really isn't that much to play with, but we have improvements at Bailey Ellard. We're starting phased-in improvements at the MRC. There are historical projects in town. This is dedicated in part to historical projects that have been purchased over time and need repairs. So I just picked $100,000. The negative to that, of course, is it would still result in an increase in the open space amount collected. And so even though your tax rate would decline, the amount of tax you would pay would go up. Now, what does that mean in dollars? This is the important slide.
This will be on the test.
This is on, oh, come on. What did I do? How do I,
Keep circling through, you're doing it.
just advance it?
Yep.
I never had trouble with these things. All right. I'm not touching it. 212, the average home was assessed at $409,000. With the revaluation, reassessments, we've calculated the average home to be at $669,000. This is meant for heuristic purposes only. Please, it's not a perfect calculation. It is a little bit of apples and oranges. But be that as it may, it at least gives you a feel for how this would work. So if you go to the left-hand side where it says 2012, that's when we had the 2-cent rate per $100 of assessed value. The school tax is shown. The municipal tax is shown. The open space tax would be $82. The county has indicated that they're not changing the amount, and that's what they charged us last year, and we're carrying that number straight across. So the last row doesn't count. There's no change. If you go to 2013 and lower the rate to the point where it would be equivalent to the amount of money you collected last year, you still have the school tax, You still have the municipal tax, but now the open space tax and the county tax are unchanged. Your tax amount has risen from $11,379 to $11,558. So unfortunately, you don't get off free. We're just talking about that third line. 2013, suppose you lower it now by 0.35 cents, get to my sort of middle ground of 1.65. Obviously, the school tax is where it is, the municipal tax is where it is, the county's where it is. The open space tax goes up from $82 to $110, 28 bucks. And that takes your total tax up to $11,586. And then finally, if you say, I want to leave it where it is, more is better, we got plenty of projects, and this is what makes Madison great, and I'm just paraphrasing what people have said to me, that would result in an open space tax rate of 2 cents per hundred, and in dollar terms for this average home, $134. So what we're talking about is the difference between $11,558 and $11,610. That's the focus of this discussion. And it's really a question of how you perceive the value of the open space fund and what you think about taxes generally. Are you willing to spend the money for the improvements on basically on things we've purchased already and potentially some new ones? But as I said, at $100,000, I'm not sure what that would buy. I was told very little when I asked that question. So, and on the other hand, of course, we would have the ability to have significant additions if we went to 2 cents. Now, I want to say one other thing about this ordinance. We get to this point with a lot of, there's been a lot of water under this bridge. And there have been some hard sides and some unfortunate conversations on both sides of the argument. What I would like to see us do is not have an opportunity to repeat that. So what I'm suggesting, in fact, I'm strongly recommending, is that regardless of what number we pick for this tax rate, that we put in the ordinance automatic triggers to raise it or lower it in accordance with whether we underperform versus how much we hope to raise or outperform how much we hope to raise. So for example, suppose that elusive client that I talked about, that I said we're having some conversations with, that's potentially willing to put up a lot of money. Suppose they don't do that by August, and we end up bonding all that you've seen before. And then come sometime between August and this time next year, they show up with a very significant amount of money. What happens? What happens is the open space tax rate gets reduced further so that the amount collected reflects that additional donation. Alternatively, and I say this obviously hoping it never happens, but if our fundraising efforts were to falter for any reason, we would have to similarly adjust because we have no other place to get the money. Right? We would commit to the open space tax paying for the fields and the land, and that's our choice.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
We'll let Carmela come back to the table, and then we'll comments and questions. And the goal here would be to come up with a direction. So next week we have a ordinance to right. Rob.
Thank you. Thank you, Ben. It's a wonderful presentation. I agree with a lot of what you said. I agree now is a fantastic time to donate to the MAF. We actually have envelopes here, and another benefit of donating is that you get your name on the website if you want it. We'll happily put anonymous if you'd like, but if you want to be recognized, you can just go to the MAF website and see everyone who has donated and kind of get on board for the whole winning positive momentum. I, too, am very troubled by Stockton filing today. I think it will have some negative ramifications in the municipal bond market. And I also agree with you that I don't think rates will be as high as our bond counsel thinks come July. But, you know, I was a trained electrical engineer, so, you know, we were always taught to design for worst case, right? And, you know, man, these guys were super smart. And it's amazing the things they could do. And then, you know, you get to Wall Street after, you know, meeting guys that can design machines that will, you know, make transistors whose width is as long as your fingernail grows in 40 minutes. Like, just brilliant guys. And then, you know, you get to Wall Street, and you know, they call guys gurus who can build nice spreadsheets. So it was kind of a different thing. You know, and I had a fantastic statistics professor who at Penn, who said for any time series of data, he can come to any conclusion that he wants. You know, and you tell me what conclusion you want, you give me the data, I'll get there. And I'm happy to see that I think we're talking apples to apples here. We're not falling into that trap. My only comment, though, is that Mayor, when we met a couple weeks ago, we had a potential strategic partner included in the mix, and that's out now. We're holding off on that to be conservative.
Yeah, well, yeah, coming out of that meeting, we took it out, but
right.
but obviously, as with Ben's comments,
Right.
we will pursue
Fair
that.
enough.
Yes.
And I think that's wise as well. Now, my only question is, if you look at slide 2, it shows a shortfall of $41,000, but it doesn't account anywhere for the $85,000 we take in user fees and field rentals. So if we apply that to that number, we actually have a surplus. And I'm wondering how we're going to account for that. So if I just add in the very conservative $85,000 a year that's raised between user fees and field rentals and sign rentals, I would go from roughly a $42,000 deficit to a $43,000 surplus.
I think it's probably not a substantial amount. We first have to deduct the amount for the short-term borrowing on the future fundraising, so we wouldn't have the full 85. Because remember, we still have the $1 million fundraising plan happens over 5 years, so we're still, and the idea would be use the user fees to step one, first priority is to cover the interest on the short-term borrowing, so we can recognize 100% of the fundraising for principal payments. And then what's left would be available for the debt service.
I'm sorry, I'm confused. I thought that in the first presentation, we said that user fees and field rentals were only included up until this year, and then everything going forward was free cash.
Right, yeah, so in the 1.1 million of total fundraising, it includes user fees up through 2012.
Yes.
And then the 85,000 that comes in is earmarked for use in the field, and initially it would be debt service, but step one priority in debt service was the short-term borrowing on, since we're not achieving the goal of $1 million fundraising on year one, we have to borrow on short-term.
We're going to do the bands, yeah,
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we use, instead of taking the fundraising money to cover interest, the idea which we talked about was make sure 100% of the fundraising, so we can tell donors 100% of your fundraising is going to a principal payment, and we're covering the interest through the user fees. So that's a deduction off of that 85,000. I don't know what it would be.
I think last year was what, 8,000 or 9,000, $10,000.
Yeah,
so there will be excess monies to be applied
right,
back.
Yeah.
Well, there is one other piece, but it's only the first year. What we didn't show here, because we didn't want to overcomplicate it, and we did have the fees off to the side, is the issuance expense. Unfortunately, going into the market is expensive, and best estimate is 70 to 90,000. So that'll be, in our first year, an issuance expense. It doesn't continue, it's the first year. But I have to say, I'm a little confused, because I thought that the first 5 years, this number that got us the major part of this 1.286 did include fees.
It does not include fees in 2013 on.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry about that confusion. So.
No, that's okay.
Right, so I mean, I would just say, you know, I actually looked at the history of one-year rates from the time the Federal Reserve was created
Right.
until presently. And I was like, well, what happens if we bought, because initially we're talking about borrowing for 10 years. And I was like, well, so if you look at the average rate increase or when rates are going up, because over the period, obviously, since rates are lower now than they were in 1912, you have a negative slope. And if, I just assumed if we, I think the average increase when rates were going up was something like 75 basis points a year. So if we assume no increase next year, because going from guidance from Chairman Bernanke, and then a 75 basis point increase over the remaining 8 years, it actually was almost scratch from borrowing today. 10 years or rolling.
Yeah.
So I don't think it makes a big difference which way we do it, and I agree with you that as a fiduciary, if, maybe it's a better idea to lock in at these historically low rates. But I still think that we're going to be closer to the rates on page 3, and we clearly are going to have excess cash flow from user fees and field rentals, which we all agree are conservative. So, and especially if you look at it over the life of if we don't just cap it at 15, if we look at it at 20 years. So again, I'm not necessarily sold that we need to do anything to this, because we'll have spare cash in the open space fund.
Well, I guess I have reaction to 2 parts of that. One is, if you suppose that these fees, which were at 85,000, need to be counted back in, you're talking about $500,000 over 12, 14 years, right?
Well, no.
It's 80?
85,000 times 10.
No, I'm sorry. Over.
So if we're looking at
boxed
a 15,
myself in.
right, if we're looking at a 15 or 20-year life for the bonds,
Yeah.
20 years at 85,000 years, 1.7 million.
Yeah, understood. But that, correct me if I'm wrong here, but I thought that amount of money was supposed to be used for, among other things, maintaining the fields and eventually reskinning them. Did I?
We have other borough. I think the issue that some might take with that is that we have other borough properties that require maintenance that aren't billed back for that maintenance. So why is the MRC special?
Well, I think the biggest part of this really has to do with the reskinning of it.
Right. So we spoke about this at the Tuesday meeting, and I believe it was the MAF's position. And look, I would love to start doing this, planning ahead, for capital expenditures. But it's not like we know we have to repave Green Avenue. Okay. We haven't been saving up money for 10 or 15 years. Okay, to do that. In fact, my first year on council, I suggested just this. I suggested that we set aside roughly $10,000 a year to repave the Madison Community Pool parking lot. Every 20 years or so, we have to repave it. Costs $200,000. 800 families. Ask each of them for $10, $15 a year to put aside. Man, it was like I suggested doing something horrible. And so we have precedent where we thought about doing this, and it's been rejected. So, if what we're talking about is rethinking the way we budget for capital, and we want to apply it broadly, well, I think I would be in favor of that, but it's a much bigger discussion than just here. And I believe was the point that Nino made, ex-councilman Nino Coviello, who's kind of running the fundraising portion of this, is that, if we need to reskin these fields in 10 or 12 years, is it necessarily fair to ask the children that are playing on it now, who will be in college, by the time we need to reskin it, to pay for it?
Right.
So, keeping in line with borough tradition, we decided that we would leave that off. At least that's what I recall.
Yeah, the conversation was initially, at least from that meeting for initially years, is to put it aside for, or use it for the debt service, but eventually to shift it over could be,
once it's paid
could be
for,
covering debt service on the reskinning.
Yeah, once it's paid for, you can stop the user fee. You can do, or you just build it up for the, for the replacement. But that's not an issue we face today. I think the issue at hand and the debate at hand is what we're going to do with the open space tax and how the cash flows will work out.
Yeah, and I think the discussion on the user fees going forward on two parts. One on the field rentals. I think there will probably, especially if it gets a lot of rentals, we probably should, at least the cost of renting, so if there's extra maintenance related to someone paying the borough to use the fields, we need to net out that money and cover those direct costs by this outside user.
From the rentals, of course.
Right, so,
Yeah,
so that would be a net out. The other is this, discussion, as we remember from that Tuesday meeting is, my approach with the user fees is, I would love to take the discussion out of a future council meeting of, should we reskin the fields now, or should we wait another 5 years and see what they, to kind of avoid the Green Avenue thing. And so it's a matter of philosophy. If the money's put aside and it can only be used for reskinning, it takes any discussion out from a future governing body.
Right, but at the same time, again, we're treating this asset as something special.
Well,
different than how we budget for anything else, even the pool at the Madison Community. Well, we're a member, and we would have gladly paid $15 a year extra for as long as it was to repay the parking lot.
Well, in that spirit, I mean, I would gladly do what you said, and we've started to do it in certain areas in our budget. But when it comes to this piece, we're talking about a lot of stuff that isn't guaranteed. And what we do know is we've got this amount of money in debt, right? And we've got to fund it. If we just keep rolling these bond anticipation notes, we come 10 years from now, we will have paid off a minor portion of the principal, and we'd be sitting there having spent whatever we spent to simply, as the expression goes, kick the can down the road. And I don't think that's...
Assuming the fundraising plan from the MAF doesn't come through, they're
No,
right.
I'm counting the fundraising plan. With the fundraising plan, you're stuck with $2.3 million.
No,
I thought you guys agreed on
That's the
that.
amount you want to borrow today. The other $1 million is, you're going to pay that off with the bond anticipation note. So for example, if we're going to do a 1-year bond anticipation note in July, and there's $200,000 in the MAF cash account, they're going to reduce the principal by $200,000 and just roll the net. And then they'll do what they do, and the fundraise. And
Wait a minute. That went a little too quickly for me.
Yeah.
If you're saying, if there were $200,000 in the cash account of the MAF at the end of the year, I would hope.
In July.
All right. So presumably that's coming in.
Yes.
To pay off the commitment to the $1 million. So how
Yeah.
did it just go to pay off something else?
The bond anticipation notes that we're going to use to fund, which is what I believe the mayor said, the $1 million, right? We're going to rely on short-term financing.
Right.
Yes, that's true.
So it's let's say it's at $1 million now. In July, we write a check for 200. We borrow 800,000.
Correct.
So then we won't be kicking the can down the road if we meet our fundraising goals, because every year we will make these principal payments in addition to the interest.
That's fine.
And satisfy.
So at the
plan.
end of 5 years, you would have paid off approximately $1 million in change.
Yeah.
Still leaving us with 2.3.
And I want to try to get.
Hold on a second, but this is exactly what we're talking about.
I'm going to give you a chance to get back, because this is a great discourse going back and forth, but I want to make sure the other council members have a chance to also get in the conversation. But I just, before I do that,
that's what we're talking about, right? Bonding $2.3 million.
Right,
and using open space money to pay for it. So we're not leaving the borough with anything.
Right.
We're doing exactly what's proposed in this presentation.
Right, and I just wanted to confirm that you were not questioning the borrowing the 2.3, but it's the, how much of the open space versus using user fees do we really need to fund it?
Wait a minute. I've had a lot of debates with people. I've never had one where we keep taking different sides of the same coin. Either you're paying the $1 million or you're not paying the $1 million.
No one said no one's not
so
paying.
So if you're paying the $1 million, that still leaves 2.3 that someone has to pay.
Yeah.
Which is what I thought you are proposing we use open space money to do.
Correct.
I agree.
Yeah.
Fine.
100%.
Yeah. So
what I'm saying, though, is that based on that,
yes.
Okay, and your slide number 2,
yes,
which omits justifiably the conservative number of $85,000 a year that will be raised from field rentals, net field rentals, and user fees.
Right.
Okay, so instead of the conclusion of a $42,000 deficit, we will have a $43,000 surplus if, in fact, we borrow at the very conservative, we both agree, very conservative interest rates that the bond council suggested. If, in fact, we borrow at rates that you propose on slide 3,
Right.
it goes from roughly a $43,000 surplus to about a $70,000 a year surplus that can be used for whatever we want. So getting back to the issue at hand, as this slide points out,
Right.
if we keep it, if we lower it from 2 cents per million to 1.23 cents per million, or per hundred, pardon me, if we don't touch the open space tax, we still will have free cash flow, again, assuming the MAF makes its fundraising goals.
You would have, under your assumptions, there are a couple of things. Under your assumptions, first of all,
No. It's, could last for a while.
I told it could last forever, right?
Hey,
Right, believe me.
no, this cannot be done in executive. This has to be done in open, and this is a discussion we have promised the public, and we are having it. And as I said, I want to try to get some comments from other council members shortly. But I just want to, again, confirm the common ground we have is we have 2.3 million we need to borrow long-term for. We have $1 million short-term borrowing, and we're kind of discussing how the sources are used to cover those needs, and we need to settle on those numbers.
Those are the assumptions I'm trying to work
Okay.
through.
Yep.
And again, I agree as well with Mr. Wolkowitz's comments that potentially we want to build some sort of sliding scale in there based on these strategic donations that we may get. But so I apologize if I'm monopolizing the conversation. I apologize if my voice went up. You know, you work on a trading room for 23 years. Sometimes you just, you go to that level. So I do apologize.
I just want to clarify something. Bob Ladrigan and I have talked about this. I have something here that says MRC financing. It's approximately the same number you have. It's a little less. It's just about $2 million. And it indicates that the user fees and the field rentals would be applied. There were usage fees of $375,000 for 5 years.
I am pretty, let me, I'm trying.
It's 2011 to 2017. That's what I've been talking about.
Let me, I've got it in front of me. So these are the numbers where the fundraising comes from. User fee, we had the 331, which included user fees through 2012. Then 2013 to 2017, this is straight from the presentation by the MAF. Special events, 75,000. Annual appeal, 100,000.
Right, I have that.
M Club, 175. Raffles, 150.
Came to 850, and then you adjusted it by 10%.
Right.
And got 787,500.
Right.
You add to that the 375, you get approximately 1.1 million. That's the number we
add to that the 330. This is over and above what's already fundraised. So I think we're counting two different numbers. So it's not the 300 plus did not come from future user fees. It came from previous fundraising. So
that's not what I'm looking at.
Okay, yeah.
I mean, I work with what I get, but I mean, that's.
I'm happy to meet tomorrow after work. We can really hash out the numbers if you'd like.
So let's get as I promised. I want to get some comments from other council members, and then we'll get some guidance from the council and next steps and homework, which we'll have because we have 7 days to turn this around. And yes, Sam, I do understand it's long but we got to make things. We got to get business done here. So any other, Bob, and then Ostry.
All right. I did it a little simpler, kind of like on a back of the envelope type of approach. I come out to, without that other substantial donor coming in, of roughly, say $1.9 million has to be financed. And that's very simply taking your total debt, $3.5 million, subtracting out all the user fees. I'm going out to 217, which is where the MAF presentation ended. So that's $375,000. That goes to a debt payment. That's simple there. You take out the $787,500, which is, the numbers we've been looking at. You add in the fundraising to date. That comes off the top. And you're coming out to a little north of $1.9 million right now. I mean, you know, I mean, we're talking 2 point something, I'm coming out to 1.9. I mean, realistically, I mean, you can adjust the numbers any way you want, and if you use a 2.3, and you look at that chart, you know, the shortfall, yeah, you're gonna have a shortfall. Because instead of 2.3, you're talking 1.9, there's gonna be a shortfall if you keep them where they are right now. Or it may just cover it, but I don't think so. You know, you're not gonna have any money left over. You know, so I just kept it very simple.
I brought my HP 12C this time. So if I borrow at 3.25%, $1.9 million for 20 years, my annual payment is $131,000.
No, there's 15 years.
It's not 15, it's 15 years.
I'm just talking about the fields.
Yep.
Okay, the magic of HP. 162.
All right.
Versus,
And then what do you add in for the other stuff? What's the other number?
238.
Yep. And what I'm going to try to do is I'm writing down some common ground so we can come up with next steps and so we can get this done. Ostry, you go ahead.
Okay, what I want to talk about, they're going to have to hash out the numbers regarding the MRC purchase and the field price. But I'm concerned about overall the open space tax fund as it relates to all the other projects that have come out of there and have been a benefit to Madison. So I'm using words rather than numbers to describe some of the things that I think are important to consider when we look at this number. What do we do with the 2 cents per $100 of assessed value? Because we've been very lucky since 2003. Everybody overwhelmingly supported this trust fund. They supported it not only for recreation, active recreation, they supported it for passive recreation, for historic preservation. Our first project, we did it according to what came first. The first thing that hit us was the Luke Miller House. We were going to lose the Luke Miller House. It was going to be developed into a tract of several pieces of property. What we were able to do is keep the Luke Miller property. We put a historic easement on it. We put it on a conforming piece of property. We kept it on the tax rolls, and the rest of the property surrounding that piece of property went to parkland. We expanded Summerhill Park. Livesey Park is an example that people have used to criticize the Open Space Trust Fund, and I'd like to say that Livesey Park actually is a really, really good example of why it's important to have a trust fund, and it's why it's important to protect that land. First, it was a pocket park right next to a school. The school board overwhelmingly supported it. It's now going to be worked on by the students at Kings Road School. It provides not only open space, it protects our water supply, it protects our air quality. That property could have been subdivided into several houses, but if it had been, it would actually cost the borough and the school board more than it would have to get the taxes back. So I think it's important that we do have some money to continue to provide possibilities, and that money that we use in the local open space tax leverages dollars from Green Acres and from the county that we can't do unless we have that fund. I'm not saying leave it at 2 cents per $100 of assessed value. I'm just saying let's please consider the possibilities of what we might need it for. We might need it for all field improvement. I know that the soccer field at Rosedale still has drainage issues. I know that the Rosedale Park, the hut is falling apart. These aren't things that are going to come from our capital. Capital is going to pay for roads. If you decrease the amount of the open space tax, it does not mean a pothole is going to be filled. Those are two completely different sources of funding. This is a dedicated source that the people said, yes, I will pay the tax to make sure we have these things. It does protect your home values. Madison is an extremely desirable place to live because we have history, we have open space, and we have terrific recreational facilities. But we've got to maintain them, and maybe this is the source of the way to do it. Those are the things I want us to consider when we talk about where should we put this tax and how much we should be collecting. Thank you.
As the number that needed to be funded. If for some reason it's a different number, I would have liked to have known that.
No, I think the number is the 2.3, and I know Bob came up with a different calculation. We're rolling. Okay, we're rolling, and so remember how we got here, which was to 3.2 was the 3.5 plus the field house minus Borough's down payment minus the 70,000 principal payment. Right. We add it back in the field house, and then we take the 7-year, or actually 8-year, because it's 2010 to 2017 inclusive, 8-year fundraising of $1,050,000, and that gets us to 2.3. So I have a good confidence level on the 2.3, and so we'll have to. Yeah, we'll have to resolve the numbers. I don't want to get too caught up in the numbers because I'm making a list of things we need to confirm. I think more we're going to come out of here with a philosophy that will guide the vote. Before I go to you, Rob, sure. I think Carmela, did you have your?
Yeah, I don't pretend to sit here and understand these two guys talking, believe me. I understand what the need is. I understand what the best thing to do for the town is. I understand the open space tax very well because I'm a very, very big proponent of it. I've seen wonderful things happen with this open space money. And I think one of the things that we're kind of really forgetting is the land acquisition of the MRC. There was a lot of grant money given to us off of that $13 million. And that took a lot of hard work. And the whole purpose of that, buying that property was because we recognized early on, and I sat on that council, and we recognized that recreation was very important in this town, and we needed to do something about it. But we also understood that there was an aquifer on that property that needed to be defended. And so all of that was taken into consideration. I get a little bit confused mainly about all of these user fees and what has happened to them. I'm looking at the slide that you just talked about, and it's saying that it excludes 70,000, of the principal payment that was made, okay? And then it excludes any user fees from 2013 on. But what happened to the user fees that were collected? I'm assuming that were $85,000, what rental and user fees?
That's all included in the fundraising to date number.
Okay, and okay.
And some of it was used to pay for the field house.
Field house, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So that's
So now you're saying the MAF has like $126,000 cash balance. What is being used for the cash balance? I mean, what are you going to do? Are you going to be given? They're going to pay down the debt. Okay. So that's something that we're going to do prior to August, right?
As soon as the bonds come due, they'll pay down the debt. However, there are expenses in it to actually build a donor. But hopefully by building the donor wall, we'll get a few more people to chip in.
Yeah. So, and going to the user fees again, the annual fees, like on that slide 5, is $50,000 just for user fees. How do you determine that it's $50,000 just for the MRC user fees? I don't get that.
That's
I mean, I don't know how we
point.
discriminate, like every person in recreation today pays a user fee.
Not
right?
all.
Not all of them?
Just the users of the turf field, and that's based, the 50,000 comes based on history. So that's based on what we're collecting now on an annual basis.
Oh, okay. Well, so in other words, nobody in recreation that is playing on the regular fields like Rosedale or whatever are paying user fees?
If the
See, that's where I get hung up on
let's take the soccer program that plays both on the turf field and Memorial Soccer Field. They pay a user fee because they use the turf field. And the Little League that doesn't use the turf field complex does not pay. This is, I don't want to get caught up on the full
That's a
definition.
Recreation
But
Advisory
as we get to the point of defining the ordinance.
And I'm really caught up on it because I'd like to hear that answer someday before I die. But,
So-
I just want to kind of say another couple of comments as Astrid talked about the open space, and then I won't make any more comments about open space tax. When we first started to talk about whether or not we would keep it at 2% or we should lower it, I have to tell you, I was a major proponent of keeping it at 2%. Listen, I'm a taxpayer. My husband is on a fixed income, and he tells me that every single day. And so I understand taxes. I work a lot with seniors, and I understand. But I also have had great conversations with people who have seen the value of it. And it's something like us going out and voting on the school budget and saying we want the best schools, so we want the best recreation. So it took a little convincing, and I had lots of conversations with Mr. Wolkowitz about this, that we should probably reduce it. And I'm at a stage right now that I think that the reduction is probably a good incentive for all of us. But I think that people should really think about what this open space tax has done for this town. And we have another week before we're going to make any decisions about this. And I invite all of you to please let us know how you feel. I've had some great conversations with people who say, leave it for the next 4 years, and we'll just sunset it within 4 years or whatever. Leave the 2%, and we could pay you off and pay down some debt. So there's a lot of good thoughts. So I'm inviting people, please, to let us know what your feelings are.
I'm going to hit some of the common grounds and some of the things in a few seconds. But Jeannie, you.
Yeah.
And then Rob, and then.
Yeah, my question is regarding the improvement portion of 15 years. Who actually determines that? Is that who makes the recommendation 15 years will be good? Because if you consider some of the infrastructure improvements, their life could be more than 15 years. So who determines that, and
I think it's bond council auditors as far as how long you depreciate.
The bond counsel has to issue a legal opinion as to the term of the note, so he has to feel comfortable. It took some convincing, as Ben was alluding. We have an 8-year warranty. We're in the second year of an 8-year warranty. The manufacturer tells.
I'm not talking about the
So
turf itself.
we pulled out the turf so it's the grading, all the site improvements minus the turf, the lights. I think, long story, I think if you took everything and average it out, the grading is almost in place forever. The light stanchions, they probably doesn't have a actual life much longer than the turf field, even though they might last longer, but I think anyone would probably give it a short life. So it's a balancing of the various components.
So 15 years is what the recommendation came back, come back with.
Right.
So we already had that discussion, that is 15 years. Okay. And second question, probably it's a question to Rob, is the rental fee. Maybe the Recreation Committee, the rental fee. Now, the $35,000, is that something that's a conservative estimate for the $35,000 a year? Is there a potential for that to be even a lot more than $35,000?
There might be a potential growth. A couple of things we are working on to firm up the rates. One is making sure we're working with the Board of Education, with Monica Field, and so we can market these things together. Number two is I spoke with Neil O'Donnell, who obviously is with Field Turf and has a great experience in what we should be charging. So we'll review all that, and we'll have that structure as part of the ordinance to have a market rate rental fee.
Okay.
Yeah, and I've actually, I've been talking to a couple colleges about actually having clinics at the MRC over the summer. I know several colleges particularly for women's sports, are very interested in recruiting from the area. And, you know, when you describe the property to them, they get very excited. Now, of course, we haven't signed anything yet, but I think that $35,000 it's conservative, but I think it's where we should be. I agree with the assumptions by Mr. Wolkowitz and the mayor.
Yeah, and another thing with rental fees is if you get too aggressive, all of a sudden you're renting and pushing off our own programs because you got so aggressive with the rental program. So we have to keep that balance. Rob, and then Ben, and then and then Bob, and then I'll bring
I just want to go on record and say that I am not against the open space tax. In fact, I have gone on record, and I know I maybe shouldn't have done it the way I did, in saying that we should cap it at $450,000, which is in fact an increase over what we're currently collecting. So there's absolutely no suggestion from me that we should do away with this tax anytime soon. I do think, though, that the priority should be on remediating what we have where necessary and paying off debt. I'm not in favor of asset purchases until we take care of this. And that's just another reason why we're so active trying to raise as much money as we can to pay this down. So please don't think that in any way I'm talking about cutting this. In fact, the number I think is a good number is $450K, which is an increase slightly over where we are. And I know the townspeople voted this in several years ago, but I think from the people I speak to, they voted in a dollar amount, not a sliding scale that would automatically increase. And that's all I want to say. Thank you.
Okay. Ben.
All right.
Okay. And then Oscar.
Am still, this is not the right place to reconcile these numbers.
Right.
However, it seems to, and we will do this, we have to do this
right.
By tomorrow, sometime tomorrow, or else we don't know where we're headed. But it doesn't take away from what the choices are. You still have the choice of selecting the rate that will keep you basically in a position where you could do the necessary funding, have nothing left for open space other than the funding. You could go to the position where you'd have everything covered and a very significant amount of money, in fact, more than you have now, or you can select some middle ground, which would give you the opportunity to pay for both and as well have a reasonable amount, that $100,000, for purposes of maintaining and improving what we already own. Now, in terms of what that means in dollars, as I said, we need to go through these calculations. Obviously, yet again, we're currently at 82 in that standard house of ours. That middle ground I had was 110. So if what we heard is absolutely correct, and I'm still, I took these numbers as given when I started this project. We're talking about probably a little less than the 1.65 cents I had mentioned earlier, right? So we reduced that somewhat, not down to the 1.23. So that still remains the topic of conversation. And as I said, we'll reconcile these numbers, but it's not going to have an enormous impact here.
Oscar, you had to...
Yeah, I liked what Rob said, and I agree with you that those should be our priorities, and it'd be interesting to have the two of you sit down and try to reconcile these numbers. And I was just want to make sure we include in that that the MRC still needs to implement their master plan, the passive component, and the remediation. Bailey Ellard definitely needs its remediation and an improvement in those fields. And I know that the Parks Committee has a list of Cole Park, the fountain, and I know that the Open Space Committee is putting together a form that says, why do you want the money? And so there are little projects like that won't be able to take it from the regular budget. They'd like to be able to come to the open space funding. So those are things that I hope we will consider as we figure out what that open space tax should be.
Okay, so here's, I think, where we are. and we need to some sort of consensus on some of these things. But I think the common ground, again, was whether it's 2.3 or exactly what it is, somewhere around in there, we have a long-term debt obligation that we need to fund. We have approximately $1 million that will be reduced to zero over 5 years, but we need to fund over a short term. And then things we need consensus with is how much free balance do we want to have in the open space for these other things that have been talked about. Mainly, we're hearing the theme is maybe not necessarily the land purchase in the near future, but really in the maintenance mode as we need to bring all our facilities up to speed, and then we've also the historic part of this priority. We have a consensus to reach on the concept of automatic adjustment. Once we come up with all these little elements, does it automatically adjust up and down if we have a increased funding or a decrease in funding? And then the last thing is the user fees. One is a reconciliation confirmation as to where they're going, but a consensus that the priority should be on debt service versus a reserve for field replacement in the future. And I think we already have on the, as a consensus that related to rentals, that it's only the net after direct rental expenses that goes into this pot. Yeah. So as far as the various questions, those are what we need. So again, confirmation, we have the common ground. 1 million short-term, 2.3, give or take, long-term. We're okay with that? Right. All right. Balance, after we cover the debt, and we have to figure out how the user fees are used, but what sort of balance do we want for other projects for open space on an annual basis? And I'm throwing that question out. What sort of, Ben, I think you showed a $100,000 number in one.
First, or?
What?
You want me to have first vote on that? No, I showed a middle ground of 100,000 excess over and above funding.
So
as a compromise position, yes.
So 100,000.
See, I would like to know what type of projects are we talking about.
I-
Then
I-
it will make a lot more sense for us to come up with a number to fund
Well,
something.
well, I think another way you can look at it, besides the automatic, if we fall short on goals or have a windfall, is not just what comes on an annual basis, but what could be a maximum on the balance at a given time that automatically reduces.
Could I address?
Yeah.
I mean, the issue is you've been having $416,000 in that fund since 2004, and that money has been spent every year by the Open Space Committee, who then comes to the council for approval. So there's no reason the process would change in this case. It would just be a smaller amount of money.
Yeah.
Same deal.
So, but I think we heard a lot of the projects are looming that could.
Well, yeah, address what Ben was just saying, that, well, historically, if we look at the past, we have used the open space money to fund DPW, which is something that we're definitely not going to do in the future.
Right, yeah, that was a short-term.
That wasn't the council I was on. But
That was done as a short-term thing, and we went back to, that's no longer being done. I think the open space fund for routine maintenance is not the priority. Open space fund to enhance our facilities, preserve historic nature of Madison, and along those lines certainly is. So,
You know, I mean, just to very quickly jump in, we need 200,000 just to get a good shot at getting that 325 I spoke about earlier. I mean, the needs for improving the things we've already spent money on, quite frankly, probably will not be covered by the 100,000. But I picked that number just because it struck me as a reasonable number, given that if all we did was fund the land and not the fields and kept the amount we collect unchanged, then open space would still have $177,000 a year to use at their discretion. So this is, this is a kind of middle ground. It reduces it, but it leaves enough to do some of the projects that we know are going to have to be done.
Austria, then Rob?
For example, the MRC requires some remediation. Bob Vogel has 2 proposals on the table for a way to park. We've had discussions about what are the benefits of each. One is more expensive than the other. One is like $100,000 and the other is $280,000. The $280,000 model allows for better usage of the entire property. And we've agreed that the MRC is a community garden, it's a passive recreation, it's an active recreation. We still have to complete that master plan. We've talked about the Bailey Eller project and the remediation that has to occur there and the improvement to the fields, and those fields are going to be needed once GVR is no longer available, which I think is this year. It would be nice to have bathroom facilities there. I mean, if we want to really make our facilities and recreation facilities top-notch, we're going to need resources, and it can come from the open space funding. So those are some of the dollar amounts I think we've, as council members, have seen recently for projects that need to be completed.
Rob?
Thank you. I think the examples given about all the remediation that needs to be done at properties, at the 49-acre property, which we're now calling the MRC, and at Bailey Ellard show that in fact we need to do a much more thorough job of quality control before we enter into purchases. You know, I wasn't on council then. I don't really recall a lot of the debate around it. But, you know, these are problems that we kind of brought on ourselves, this extra money that needs to be laid out. You know, and then as it pertains to other fields, I strongly support athletics in this town. I voted for the 49-acre, I voted for the MRC. I voted to fund money for it. I'm an active supporter of recreation. But I think that before we do anything with the fields, we need to update our recreation master plan, which was done prior to the building of the turf field complex. And I think that we should do it in concert with the Board of Education because, you know, we are sharing each other's fields interchangeably. You know, it's like when I was growing up and I lived in, you know, I shared a room with my brother. You know, we borrow everything, right? So I think that we need to do this in a measured way. And again, I think a lot of the problems we have and a lot of the justifiable concerns that are being voiced here about monies that we need for remediation just shows that we need to do a better job before we buy other properties. So again, I think that would be down my priority list. And I think the top of the priority list would be, let's really figure out, let's work with the Board of Ed, let's really figure out what we need in terms of fields. Let's commission another recreation master plan that takes into effect, we're going to lose GVR, but we picked up the MRC. See if we can do a better job of scheduling at the MRC. You know, I was out there at 8:30 on Saturday with the community gardens with my new rototiller. In case anyone's a community garden member and they want to borrow my rototiller, let me know. I'm happy to give it to you. You know, and there was no one on the fields, and probably could have had something going. I imagine the fields were reserved. I don't know. So I think through the combination of maybe more effective scheduling and a cooperative approach with the BOE on a recreation master plan, we can get a much better handle on what the strain will be, and then in addition to just remediating Bailey Ellard, you know, we can decide what we want to do with those fields there and design fields for what sports we think will be primary users. So, thank you, Mayor.
Before I go to you,
I promise I won't say anything else.
No. I think the Recreation Committee is taking on that task.
Yeah, the Recreation Committee has taken on that task. Well, when we get to the other discussion, I'll fill you in on the rest.
Yep. And before I go to you, Ben, I just want to, I think we're not going to get obvious consensus on this, so after Ben's comment, I will ask for a motion on some sort of amount dollar amount of money available from open space after taking care of bond payment commitments.
Right.
Okay, so Ben?
My only comment was, I said this earlier when I talked about putting an automatic clause into the open space tax adjustments. I have to say, I did that, and I've tried to remain very neutral here, but I ran for office with my partner, and I heard her lambasted for months over exactly the same issue you feel compelled to raise tonight. I have no idea what that has to do with paying for the fields or the open space tax.
I'm sorry, are you addressing me, sir?
Yes, I am.
Would you like me to respond?
And this is really, again, related to the fact that talking about past history and due diligence, I think part of it is we're in North Jersey, and it's probably tough to come up with completely clean land, and the fact that we did preserve the space no matter what, and we did get $100,000 in the at closing of Valley Eller to take care of the remediation there. Rob, a quick.
I'm not sure what do you want me to answer?
Well, I think it was just questioning whether the was perceived as an attack. We'll take it as a.
We're talking about.
Okay, I'm sorry, but
no, we're talking about budgeting. And a big portion of what we need to budget for is past property that was bought that is polluted.
Look, if I can,
So,
I mean,
so
if
we need to, so what I'm saying is, we should clean that up first before we go and buy anything new. And if we're gonna buy something new, let's get the Madison Environmental Commission involved, okay? And really do the same, and do some real due diligence on what it is we're buying. I don't see how that's controversial.
Yeah, and I don't think anyone disagrees with we learned some lessons, and going forward, we will do what we need to do the right thing.
Mr. Mayor, I'll risk being out of order here. I really resent that comment, and I resent it because I saw what happened during the election. I think it is totally
Sam, I'm sorry. We're back here next week if you want to make a comment.
There are many people who spoke to me over the last couple of years who indicated that they thought, and rightly so, that the fields were totally going to be raised without public money. I've heard that said over and over again. I have no idea who said it, why it was said, but I never heard anyone refute that comment. So here we are discussing whether it's 2.3 or 1.9. It's going to cost the people in this room, it's going to cost me. You want to still have this discussion? We can have it all night long. But the point is, it doesn't raise a nickel. And that's what I'd like to get away from.
Right.
So what I'd like to get to right now is how much.
I mean, I think, but one of the reasons we're having this discussion is because there's a rush to bond, which is fine. Which is fine.
Well, there's also there's a need right now. That
I'm sorry, I don't mean to upset you.
To say there's a rush to bond when these fields
I don't
were
think any
approved
comment
4
you have
years
made
ago.
tonight, sir, is ridiculous. I think everything you've said is well thought out, and I appreciate it. And I respect everything you've said, and I agree with almost all of it. And I don't understand why you're saying that what I'm doing is ridiculous.
Okay.
We worked hard to consider the timing.
Okay, but Ben, let's.
Consulting.
Okay. I want to try to move on, and we are here for two main reasons. One, from the excellent presentation, we saw that we are at historic lows for bonding, and if every time we push it, we gamble. The other thing is, if there is no action by this council in the next, over the next month,
we have to do it before the budget.
Well, and it has to come back on April, it has to be introduced on April 8th, which I'm saying over the next month. If there is no action by this council, the open space rate will be at 2 cents per 100. Correct. And the taxes will be going up. And that is why we're having this very productive conversation. And what I'm at right now is, after taking care of the debt service for the land purchase and the field improvements, and I'm asking for a motion from the council, what is an amount you'd like to have as a target to have as additional funding for other projects that have just been described, remediation, field improvements, and so on? So is there someone who would like to make a...
Mayor, I'd like to move approximately $100,000. I'll go along with Ben because there's been conversations about
Actually, just make the motion, and then you can add your, and do
$100,000.
$100,000 over and above, on an annual basis, we're targeting $100,000 over and above money needed to cover
Correct.
debt service. Is there a second?
Second.
Council discussion. Jeannie, and then Bob, if you want to. Yes, Jeannie?
I'm looking at these numbers for the first time. When everybody is sitting here looking at these numbers, I don't think I'm ready to decide on a number here.
Again, to be clear, is what you're looking
Yeah,
at.
the second
We've
question
got to
is-
refine some of these numbers, but
Right.
we're saying on an annual basis, $100,000 available for other projects. And we've described what those projects would be. So it's almost regardless of what those numbers are. It is just the target would be, after we take care of debt service, have $100,000 on hand for additional projects.
And my second question is, just to clarify, when we need to make the decision of open space tax, is that next Monday?
It would be-
Before we
it would be in-
finalize the budget,
It would be
correct?
introduced on Monday, and the second hearing later at the...
That's the part that I don't understand. Do we
20th.
need to make a decision next Monday, or we're introducing a
It-
new
it-
rate next Monday?
Introducing next Monday as the ordinance, and with a hearing of the 22nd.
So we do not need the finalized number as part of the budget approval? No, we don't.
But we basically, we need it coincidentally, because it's going to be part of the tax bill, so we have
Right,
to
exactly.
introduce it. It has to be introduced next Monday.
Okay.
Other questions or comments on the motion? All right, roll call vote, please. Oh, I'm sorry, Bob, do you want?
Okay.
Yeah.
And let me just explain why I said $100,000. None of us here are new to council. You know, you've been on council for a number of years. Everybody here has been. For years, we've had over $400,000 to spend in open space tax, you know, and we've all benefited from it. What's going to happen now is the bulk of that money is going to go toward paying down debt that we incurred, an unfunded mandate, as I've heard people say before. It's a fact of life. It's going to happen. What I'm saying is, going forward, $100,000 is only a quarter of what we've had for years to spend on projects that have been teed up. It's not a hard concept to understand. You know, we're going to pay our debt, and we're going to cut what we have available for projects by 75%. It's going down to $100,000. That simple.
Other comments? Okay, roll call vote, please.
Mrs. Sukamoto?
Abstain?
Mr. Catalanello?
I'd have to say no.
Mr. Landrigan?
Yes.
Mrs. Vitale?
Yes.
Ms. Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Wolfowitz?
Yes.
All right,
Motion passes.
it passes, so that's
But
the...
will we keep it at a minimum of 450? Because if all of a sudden the debt service comes in at 250, we're only going to do 350? I mean,
Well, we need, one of the things we've come out of this is we need to massage our numbers a little bit better, but
Okay.
what I'm hoping to...
I mean, yeah, I
by
must say,
these-
one of the reasons I voted no is because I don't want to spend less than 450.
Right,
And by saying we're only going to do 100 more, then,
good,
right?
good point.
So maybe, you know, I get a chance to change my vote if we do the numbers, right? Is that okay? Or maybe we'll... yeah,
First off, let me just say,
I think we have
vote,
I do feel a consensus, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, that no one is talking about reducing it really below where we're at right now, the 450 level, or...
No, we're not at a
No.
450. We don't know what the level
Well, I
is.
know, I'm just, to Rob's point, was he didn't want to, all of a sudden, if we were able to cover the debt service by $250 a year, he didn't want it at $350, because we've already had the history of collecting around $450. That's basically what you were...
I guess
Yeah, okay,
bingo.
thank you.
I just want to say one thing, just so you understand. When you passed your bond referendum a number of years ago for the open space tax, it said 2 cents. It didn't say up to. Many municipalities have an up to 2 cents. We've done legal research. I've given a memorandum. I believe that you can reduce that amount. You can never exceed that amount without a referendum. There's some theories that you can't even reduce it without a referendum. I think that if you look at the legislation and the statutes, you can reduce it below 2 cents. You have to do it by ordinance. So I don't believe that you're going to have you're going to be able to pass an ordinance that's going to have a float on it, where if you don't get fundraising, I think what you'll have to do is, if you're short money, if you don't get revenue from a big investor, you have the right to then introduce a new ordinance and change it. And you can change it up or down, up to the 2 cents. It cannot exceed 2 cents. So I think that, people should just go into knowing that, be conservative, because if you're counting on a big source of revenue coming in from an investor and it doesn't come in, it's going to be a lot harder to go back out and say, oh, we reduced it down to 1.35 cents. We didn't get the money. Now we have to raise the taxes up to 1.65.
Yeah.
So just keep that in mind, to have that cushion in there. And it will require first and second reading, public hearing every time you do this by ordinance.
And it's also has to be timed in such a way as with the tax bill.
That it coincides with your third quarter, fourth quarter.
So you can do it once a year is what we're looking at. So the other one I'm looking at consensus is the 85,000, assuming we need to massage our numbers and make sure we're not double counting, but in the presentation, we talked about 85,000 a year going forward for debt service. And the concept is, priority one is covering the short-term debt on the $1 million borrowing, and then it goes to the long-term debt. The other suggestion we heard is a combination that would also put some aside for future reskinning of the field. So I put it out there if someone wants to make a motion related to the use of the user fees based on a clarification of what is available. And I'm not too sure if I'm making sense, but I think I am.
Can we hold off? I mean, I would move, I think we need to just hold off to have a better understanding of how it all shakes out.
Okay, all right. So at this point, for Ben as chair of finance, and knowing we have to come back next week with a drafted ordinance, do you have the guidance? We're covering debt service, land purchase, and the fields with a $100,000 cushion, and we're really not lowering it. We're not going to lower it below where we are today, because I think we have consensus on that.
No, but I must say council's comments sort of put me in a different place. It does indicate that we need to err on the side of being conservative,
Yeah.
which I wasn't necessarily interested in doing, but I don't see another way around this. I just bring that up.
Yeah, and the exposure we have is basically 1 year falling short, because then you can adjust it on the next year. Okay?
But even so, it's not automatic. So,
right.
For example, funding doesn't come through to the amount you'd hoped.
Yep.
You have to try and pass an ordinance to do it. If you don't pass the ordinance, you've just defaulted on a bond.
Yeah, that would not do well on our AAA rating. Okay, do we have enough to work with? Yep. All right. Thank you, and I appreciate everyone's patience in the audience. And I think everyone that's on the ballot come June is in the room, so this is a little feeling for what you're trying to sign up for. Last thing on our discussion agenda, appropriation of $34,000. $35,000 is, for the General Capital Improvement Fund to study the Madison Public Library HVAC system. It's Ordinance 7, which is listed for introduction, and our library director, Nancy Damchek, is here.
Good evening. We talked about this a month ago when we were here for the capital budget hearing. We are requesting $35,000 for an engineering study of our HVAC. Things have just gotten worse since we talked a month ago. Our maintenance supervisor was on vacation for a week. I had to call our service company in 3 times. We have 1 unit down. Tomorrow Honeywell will be on site to try to get the unit up and running. The rooftop units were manufactured by Nesbitt, and they are out of business, so parts are very difficult to find. So what we need to do is have a consultant come in and study of exactly what the best step is, our next steps, and what the best solutions are. So Bill Van Ryzen is here if you have any detailed questions, but we would appreciate your consideration of the $35,000 for the study.
So this is part of the recommended capital budget. And just so people understand, this would be introduced today and second hearing, which would coincide with final approval of the budget. So we're not jump starting too much. Any questions or comments for, okay, we've got it listed for introduction. Thank you for staying, Nancy. Ordinances listed for hearing.
Okay, the ordinances scheduled for hearing were introduced by title and passed on first reading at a regular meeting of the council held March 11, 2013. All were posted and filed according to law, and copies were made available to the general public requesting same.
All right, I call ordinances for second hearing. Ask the clerk to read said ordinances by title.
Ordinance 3, 2013, ordinance of the Borough of Madison rescinding Ordinance 42, 2009, establishing a standing finance committee for joint meetings with the Board of Education.
I open the hearing. Is anyone wishing to be heard on ordinance 3-2013? Seeing none, I close the hearing. Ben?
I move.
I second.
Discussion? Roll call vote.
Mrs. Sukamoto?
Yes.
Mr. Catalanello?
Yes?
Mr. Landrigan?
Yes.
Mrs. Vitale?
Yes.
Ms. Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Wolkowitz?
Yes.
I declare ordinance 3-2013 adopted and finally passed, and ask the clerk to publish notice thereof in the newspaper and file the ordinance in accordance with the law.
Ordinance 4, 2013, calendar year 2013 ordinance to exceed the municipal budget appropriations limit and to establish a cap bank.
I
So
open-
moved.
No, not yet.
Sorry.
Jump.
Jumped the gun.
I appreciate it this time of night, though. I open the hearing for ordinance 4, 2013. Is anyone wishing to be heard on this ordinance? Seeing none, I close the hearing now.
I have a motion.
I'll second it.
Discussion? Roll call vote.
Mrs. Sukamoto?
Yes.
Mr. Catalanello?
Yes.
Mr. Landrigan?
Yes.
Mrs. Vitale?
Yes.
Ms. Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Wolkowitz?
Yes.
I declare ordinance 4, 2013 adopted and finally passed, and ask the clerk to publish notice thereof in the newspaper and file the ordinance in accordance with the law.
Ordinance 5, 2013 is ordinance of the Borough of Madison appropriating $50,768.90 from the reserve for filtration system in the water utility and $669,231.10 from the Water Capital Improvement Fund for water main replacement of municipal roads, including portions of Ridgedale Avenue and Green Village Road.
I open the hearing for ordinance 5, 2013. Is there anyone wishing to be heard on this ordinance? Seeing none, I close the hearing.
I move ordinance 5-2013.
Second.
Discussion? Roll call vote.
Mrs. Sukamoto?
Yes.
Mr. Catalanello?
Yes.
Mr. Landrigan?
Yes.
Mrs. Vitale?
Yes.
Ms. Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Wolkowitz?
Yes.
I declare ordinance 5, 2013 adopted and finally passed, and ask the clerk to publish notice thereof in the newspaper and file the ordinance in accordance with the law. And now we are on round 2 of invitation for the discussion. I apologize for those that have stayed late. We've been usually very good about getting up people in a timely manner, but obviously it was a worthwhile discussion. And this is when you can speak on any topic, but you still must keep your comments to 3 minutes or less. And when you step up there, state your name and address. And before I get the first person, we'll see how we go before you go for a motion to extend.
Yeah, good evening. My name is Bill McShane. I live at 21 Albright Circle. And just for a point of clarification, I'd like to see, is the construction of Sampson Avenue and the non-conforming use going to be heard on May 8th? April 8th? I couldn't hear what Councilman Astori was saying.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
Yeah, there is, on the non-conforming use, there was a construction of Sampson is ongoing. Our attorney can talk about what we're dealing with on the non-conforming use.
No, I said that the Complete Streets Committee would be discussing it
Okay.
May 1st.
May 1st.
At 8 a.m. in the committee room here
Thank
at Hartley Dodge Memorial. And we'll put it on towards, latter part so you can get kids to school and attend.
Yeah,
And we'll just be discussing exactly what has transpired, what they've investigated, and how we deal with our Safe Routes to School program in light of what's going on there and what can be done.
Yeah, that's really the main concern is the federal grant for the Safe Routes to School. how we can keep the kids safe, how we keep the neighborhood safe, and not destroy, new improvements that are being put in. As we all talked about, about how much the budget is under constraints. We just want to make sure that, there's not, new improvements aren't getting torn up, and the kids don't have to fight their way through garbage and trucks and that type of stuff.
Yes.
All right, so May 8th at 8 o'clock.
May 1st.
Oh, sorry,
8 a.m. Yep.
8 a.m.?
8 a.m.
In this room?
In the committee room, which is right down next to this building.
Okay.
Right
And that's a Complete Streets Committee.
It's a complete streets.
Thank you, Bill.
Hi, my name is Laurie Thomas. I live at 28 Niles Avenue in Madison. And I've brought over 100 signatures from Madison residents about, the SEIU has helped put this together. They're concerned because Borough Council is charged with choosing a developer for the Green Village Road School property, and they have grave concerns about the business practices of one of the people that, or one of the organizations that, or one of the businesses that's is being considered for this business, which is Avalon Bay Communities. Many Avalon Bay employees can't afford health insurance for their families, and Avalon Bay has repeatedly hired construction companies that violate worker safety laws. Like citizens in Metuchen and Princeton that have already spoken up against Avalon Bay, I write to say Avalon Bay is the wrong choice for Madison. And we have more information about the issue over here.
And you can submit these, bring those up to the clerk, and we will.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to be heard? Thank you.
My name is Paul Cerner. I live at 53 Albright Circle. Many of you have gotten various emails, basically through Mr. Cody, about concerns of that non-conforming site on Sampson, and I know it's going to be brought up for discussion, but I have some major concerns. One of them is that right now, as the operation at the facility does pose a danger to the pedestrians, whether they're children, whether it's anybody else walking on that street. I've been on the block for 10 years, so I haven't been here, as many years as, as lifelong residents, but over the past 10 years, I have seen a change in the use of the properties and increased truck traffic and the size of the trucks. And my concern is that the slope at which you need to come out of that site, and the trucks don't have a proper line of sight for pedestrians, especially for children. The children aren't even aware that a truck could be coming out of it. So the speed at which a truck needs to accelerate, it may not have the ability to stop, or the pedestrian may not have the ability to stop, and somebody's going to get hurt. And, originally it seemed like those sites were designed for small manufacturing businesses. One is a tool and die company, and before that, I think it was a porcelain switch company behind that. They've changed ownership, they've changed use. And it's fine. The point isn't to drive businesses out of the town. The point is to encourage the businesses that are there to comply with, zoning laws, comply with the size of the space available. And there's a large railroad easement that runs through that property that the trucks and a lot of debris are parked on. And some of them are dangerously close to the railroad tracks. In fact, if you went out there with a tape measure, some of them are 4 or 5 feet from the track itself, from the actual rail. God forbid there was some type of debris spillover, a derailment. You can't even get emergency vehicles onto that facility because the easement is blocked by the trucks. I don't know if there was ever approval from New Jersey Transit to use that easement for that reason. So the point is basically to try to come up with a plan for a more efficient use of that space for those businesses and for the residents of the town to make it safe for everybody and not become such an issue of concern. And I'm hoping that comes up when your committee meets, because again, the point is not to drive a business out of an area or drive a resident out of an area. It's basically to try to come to some agreement to be better neighbors for one another. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And just to confirm, since we are working on Sampson to make it a more walkable street, and you are right, no one wants an accident on that site, and so we will work with the owners, and the Complete Streets will look at options. I think we can also maybe check with New Jersey Transit just to confirm that they are not putting anyone in danger with the location of the trucks. Yes, Pat.
I'll make it short. Pat Rowe, 25 Pine Ave. I had written a letter to you guys about 8 weeks ago, I'm sorry, 6 weeks ago. I put a letter to the editor, and I was going to read the relevant portion of it that I still think holds tonight. The council should discuss what their expectations of the MAF's fundraising will do to limit the cost to taxpayers for the turf fields before they commit to bonding the outstanding cost. They should also outline how or if the open space tax increase is needed to cover this cost, the cost of the purchase of the property, the cost of the remediation of the environmental issues at the MRC and Billy Ellard, or any other land acquisitions or improvements they may be contemplating before allowing the open space to automatically increase or before incurring any more long-term debt. I was hoping tonight to come here and get an answer to some of these questions, and unfortunately, I guess through some confusion, we still don't have a lot of that fleshed out. Hopefully in the next week you will. Unfortunately, I will not be able to come back next week because I'll be in Chicago. If you have any opportunity to post the results of your analysis in advance, I'd be happy to give you comments as I go on the budget as well. The other thing that would be helpful is, Ms. Bailey mentioned, we've been discussing the remediation costs, and I assume that's between the 6 of you, or the 7 of you, because we haven't really, as the public, heard what the specific costs are going to be, as far as I know. I don't know if there's been a presentation made to council, so one of the issues that I have is, yes, I understand there may be a need to add to the amount of money that's available, but as the general public, we don't know what that is, or why. So it would be helpful if we had that part of the presentation also next week, and I'll look forward to seeing it on video when I come back. Thank you very much.
Quick, yeah.
Pat, I just wanted to say, if you're away and you're interested in how
always
this
interested.
transpires, send me an email, tell me how to reach you, and I'll do that.
Thank you very much. We have my email address, so.
Sorry?
You have my email address, correct?
I'm not.
We've
Yes.
Okay,
communicated
so,
in the past.
all right, so, thank you. Thank you, Ben. Anyone else wishing to be heard? Yes, Maureen?
Maureen Byrne, 49 Albright. On the question of the open space tax and what we're setting aside for various programs, I've been out of Wall Street for a number of years, but I've been raising a lot of money ever since, and particularly raising money in Madison. And Madison has been very generous to me and to all of the things that I've raised money for, the community house and the library in particular. But I have to point out that when you're raising funds, it's a whole lot easier to raise money if you are pointing to something that hasn't been built yet. Once something has been built, it becomes increasingly difficult to fund it because everyone says, well, it's there, and why do I have to put money to it? So I think when we're contemplating our open space tax, I think while I commend the MAF and I wish them all the best of luck, and if you need some help, give me a call. I think we have to take a fairly pessimistic view about what can be raised over the next 5 years in the economy that we're in now. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to be heard?
Richard Zipper, 197 Greenwood Avenue. Just a reminder about the $35,000 a year you're anticipating on the rental of the fields. Florham Park is building a very similar recreation complex as we speak, and there may be some competition for those rentals in a couple of years. The other thing I wanted to ask is, I've noticed a lot of work at Summerhill Park recently. A lot of bulldozers in there pushing dirt around. Does anyone know? They're cutting up the trees that fell from Sandy.
Yeah,
Does anyone
that's
know?
removal of the Sandy damage. Correct.
Okay. Would that be money from open space would pay for that? Is that something that open space money would pay for, or is that not what open space money is paying for? I'm just trying to get an idea on how open space money
Want me
is
to answer
spent.
it? Generally, open space trust funds, they're very restrictive in what you can spend the funds. They have to be systemic improvements, long-term. You can't use it for regular maintenance, so it would be prohibited to pay for lawn maintenance of all the fields or to clean the AstroTurf. You cannot do that. To put in an AstroTurf field or to, change all of the playground mulch at every playground in town to that rubberized mulch, that would be a permissible use under the Open Space Trust Fund.
Okay, so in this particular instance, there was a shall we say, catastrophic event that's being remediated. Is that covered under the open space?
I didn't.
They're fixing the sandy damage at Summer Hill
Well, I
Park.
think that the sandy damage is probably coming under FEMA
Maybe I can join in. We did advance the funds out of the Open Space Trust Fund, and with Bob Landrigan's help, we're now submitting that cost to FEMA, and we hope to get back 75% of it. But you raise an important point. That pot is like, I use the term early money is like yeast. That's our leverage pot. So like when we applied for grants for the MRC site, we had the ability to put money out, and because of that, the county came up with $7.3 million. With the amount of money that we're going to have, the differential between debt service and $100,000, we're going to be out of business because we're not going to have the money, the matching grants required to compete for those grants any longer, or to respond to emergencies like that at Summer Hill, the MRC site, and the woods behind the library in Pomeroy. We need dollars to meet these obligations, and we're not going to have it under.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to be heard? Seeing none, I close this part of the meeting. And consent agenda. Introduction order. And we are at
11.
all right. Can I have a motion to extend the meeting by 10 minutes?
So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. My streak is ending. Okay.
So-
Introduction of ordinances.
Ordinance is scheduled for first reading, have a hearing date set for April 22nd, 2013. It will be published in the Madison Eagle, posted on the bulletin board, and made available to members of the public requesting copies.
I call up the ordinances for first reading and ask the Borough Clerk to read said ordinances by title.
Okay, Ordinance 6, 2013, ordinance of the Borough of Madison appropriating $35,000.
No, we're renumbering, so.
We're renumbering, thank you.
Yep.
Okay, once again, ordinance of the Borough of Madison appropriating $35,000 from the General Capital Improvement Fund to study the Madison Public Library HVAC system.
Motion?
I move ordinance 6-2013.
Second?
Second.
Discussion? Roll call vote?
Mrs. Sukamoto?
Yes.
Mr. Catalanello?
Yes.
Mr. Landrigan?
Yes.
Mrs. Vitale?
Yes.
Ms. Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Wolkowitz?
Yes.
All right, now consent agenda resolutions.
Consent agenda resolutions will be enacted with a single motion. Any resolution requiring expenditure is supported by a certification of availability of funds. Any resolution requiring discussion will be removed from the consent agenda. All resolutions will be reflected in full in the minutes.
I move resolutions 113 to R124 and R126 to 130. We had an extra one, right?
130?
130.
What
Which
was
one
130?
130?
The one that
May-
went-
May Day, thank you.
After May Day.
Place setting.
Yes.
Ah,
is that our-
got it.
Authorizing
Second.
May Day. Thank you.
Yep.
Discussion? Yes, Judy?
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. I want to make a comment regarding 113. I understand that this is the one resolution regarding Madison opposing the two bills currently pending regarding registration of multifamily dwellings. I thought that these legislations is to prevent duplication of registration, both by the state and also by the municipality. And currently, we are getting the information from the state. I believe Liz does receive all the registration information from the state. And in the resolution here, it talks about that for us to duplicate the effort can help overcrowding in the town. I really don't see how this will help us resolve the issue that we have in town regarding stacking. And, but potentially, having us do the duplication of work to register all the multifamily dwellings will cause the good landlords to have to register multiple times and potentially could also have these good landlords.
Just keep in mind that it gives us the option in the future of doing it. It doesn't require us to do it. But right now we have the option. If this bill passes, we would not have the option if we felt it was necessary to do our registration at a local level.
Right.
I had the same issue as you did, Jeannie, but I read it as giving us, the municipality, the right to do it either way. And it's an either-or situation. It's not going to be a duplication. It's going to be, if there was in the best interest of our municipality to take over what the state's doing, then we would do it. That's how this should be read, I think.
But the state, it's not talking about at any point soon that they're going to discontinue the registration effort, right? So
they're not going to. They would continue it, and we want, as we have today, the option to do it at a local level.
Well, see, I don't ever want to get us into this situation. I believe, if I understand this correctly, right now the landlord has to pay a registration fee. With something like this, you don't.
That's not right.
For a two-family,
no, this is for multifamily.
yeah, but right now the way it works is there is no fee. Because I have a two-family, I just went in and gave them my information.
No, this is more than 3.
I know,
Okay.
but the way we're running it right now is we have a registration process for two-family homes and rental properties, and it's a free process. It's required, but people just provide their information, so we have it readily available.
The registration you're talking about is with the state?
No, because it's a two-family.
With here, understand, right.
Yeah, but I'm just, the point I'm trying to make is it's a no-fee registration. This would require, it gives Madison, as other towns would, the option to do it if they felt necessary, but it would require the sitting council decide what a registration process would be and if there would be a fee, if anything.
Yeah, understand.
What it does actually is, right now you have that option. It takes away that option. It prohibits municipal registration of multifamily dwellings, 3 or more units. So basically, what you've seen over the last, there's been a couple changes in legislation. Especially in a town like this where you do have a Board of Health that's actively going out there looking at multifamily units, it usurps that authority from the municipality. That's why the League has recommended the local municipalities oppose this legislation because it's taking away your ability to self-govern. Right now, the state, you can dual register if you want. You guys, they register with the state right now, and you have the right, if you so desire, to have them registered here. That would usurp that right.
But currently, for Madison, do we register multi-family dwellings over 3? We don't, right? We only.
The state doesn't.
Right?
So
The
we
state
just
doesn't.
want to, at some future date, it may say, God, I wish we could register 3 family homes or larger, but if the state passes this, the answer would be, no, you can't.
We will not be able to do that.
Right, so we want to make sure we have that ability, and every other town in New Jersey has that ability.
We want the right to not.
Right.
Okay.
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 Any other questions? All right, roll call vote?
Mrs. Sukamoto?
Yes.
Mr. Catalanello?
Yes.
Mr. Landrigan?
Yes.
Mrs. Vitale?
Yes.
Ms. Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Wolkowitz?
Yes.
There is no unfinished business. Approval of vouchers.
Okay. Public safety, $25,740.48. Health and public assistance, $5,965.79. Public Works and Engineering, $123,998.47. Community Affairs, $8,321.81. Finance and Borough Clerk, $2,790,955.05. Utilities, $1,240,341.33. Total is $4,195,322.93.
Mayor, I move approval of the vouchers.
Second that.
Discussion? Roll call vote?
Mrs. Sukamoto?
Yes.
Mr. Catalinello?
Yes.
Mr. Landrigan?
Yes.
Mrs. Vitale?
Yes.
Ms. Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Wolkowitz?
Yes.
And there is no new business.
A motion to adjourn.
Second. Thank you all.